Good evening and welcome to this evening's Development Management Committee meeting. I am Joan Grime, Councillor for Culcheth, Glaisbury and Croft, and I will be chairing the meeting. Due to the current coronavirus pandemic, the Council have taken steps to follow restrictions and health guidance in relation to social distancing, whilst balancing the needs of carrying out our regulatory functions. This is the 7th meeting of this committee that's being held remotely. The agenda for the meeting will run as per the usual format. The meeting is being broadcast live to the public, who have had the opportunity to make written representations which have been distributed to members. However, there will be no input from the public during the meeting. This is in line with the Coronavirus Act of 2020, Section 78. Present at the meeting are 9 elected Borough Councillors, plus officers of Warrington Borough Council. I will now ask all those present to introduce themselves. Will Councillors also confirm that they have received the agenda and reports on the applications and have a copy in front of them? An update report has also been circulated and available for members to view. So, Councillor Barr.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Barr, a resident Nim North and Thelwall, and I confirm that I have the papers in front of me and have read the additional items.
Thank you. Councillor Carey.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Peter Carey, representing Fairfield and Howley, and I confirm that I've had all the additional papers and have read them all.
Thank you. Councillor Friend.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. My name's Councillor Graham Friend, representing Poulton North. I have received all the papers, I have them in front of me, and I have read them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Councillor Les Morgan, Latchford West. I confirm I've got all the papers read and understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mundry. Councillor Mundry, are you with us?
She muted.
Councillor Cara Mundry, Latchford East. I confirm I've had the papers and I have read them and understood them. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Parish.
Councillor Steve Parish from Chapelford and Old Hall. Yes, I've got all the papers and all the addenda and have read them.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Good evening, Judith Wheeler, Councillor for Appleton, Hatton, Stretton and Higher Walton. Confirm that I've received the papers and the updates and I have read them. Thank
you. Councillor Wright.
Councillor Steve Wright, Busey Whitecross. I confirm I've got all the papers read and understood.
Thank you. I'll also ask the officers to introduce themselves. Democratic Services.
Jenny Cordwell, Senior Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. Legal Services.
Paul Clisby, Solicitor.
Thank you. Planning.
Nikki Gallagher, Development Manager.
Thank you. Transport.
Thanks, Chair. Mike Taylor, Highways Development Control.
Thank you. Right, going on to agenda item 1. Have we got any apologies, Jenny?
Yes, apologies from Councillor Tony McCarthy and Councillor Brian Marr.
Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest which they have in any item of business on the agenda, no later than when that item is reached. Councillor Barr.
I have no declarations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Carey. Councillor Carey, are you with us?
Sorry, Chair, it had gone off. No declarations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Friend.
Thank you, Chair. No declarations.
Councillor Morgan.
Likewise, Chair. No declarations of interest.
Thank you. Councillor Mundry.
No declarations of interest.
Councillor Parish.
Chair, I sit as a ward member for the area on the Omega Partnership Group, which is a liaison group between the developers and the council. But all the meetings last year were cancelled, so it's not actually met for 2 years. So this has not featured in any of the discussions I've had on that group.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
No, Chair, but I'd like to point out that one of the objectors to one of the Amiga applications, and I can't remember whether it's application 4 or 5 now, is Keith Gleave, who was my fellow ward councillor in Whittle Hall for a number of years, but I haven't spoken to him about his objection on this occasion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright?
No declarations.
Thank you. Coming to myself, I'm a member of Culcheth, Glaisbury and Croft Parish Council who have objected to item 5, but I have played no part in any of the discussions and I left the meetings when the matters were discussed. In fact, when any planning matters are discussed. Paul Clisby, have you got any comments to make on any of these?
No, Chair. Those comments don't reveal any issues in terms of having to stand down from the committee. Thank you. We come to the minutes of the last meeting. Has any member seen a problem with the minutes of the meeting on the 22nd of July, which have been circulated to you? Any problems, anyone?
Chair?
Yes?
It's Councillor Wheeler. On page 4 of our printed copy, the declarations of interest, it says I was a member of Stretton Parish Council who had objected to the application. I'm not a member of Stretton Parish Council. It's in my ward and I do attend their meetings, but I'm not a member of Stretton Parish Council.
Okay. Jenny, have you got that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll update. That's fine. Thank you.
Right. Anything else, councillors? Okay, so with that amendment, I confirm that the minutes of the DMC meeting held on the 22nd of July 2020 are a correct record. Thank you. We now come to the planning applications. So we have item 4, application number 2019-36241. This is phase 4 to 7, Omega South, Warrington, WA5 7XQ. Outline planning permission for the development of up to 617 residential units and a mixed-use zone to include retail or food and drink uses. That's use classes A1, A2, A3, A4 and A5. A hotel, use class C1. An extra care facility, use class C2. And a non-residential institution, use class D1. With details of access only, all other matters are reserved for subsequent approval. The recommendation is for approval subject to conditions and an S106, which are given in detail in the notes, and subject to the decision from the Secretary of State of whether to call in the application. Can I invite the Development Manager to present a report?
Thank you, Chair. So the application seeks outline planning consent for up to 617 residential units and associated mixed-use provision to include an extra care facility, retail, food and drink uses and non-residential institution. The application seeks to establish the principle and details relating to access only. All other matters will be reserved for further submissions. The main access points are at Burton Wood Road, Kingswood Road, Burton Wood Road and Whittle Avenue, and via the previous consented application on Stanhope Drive. The site comprises 24 hectares to the west of Burton Wood Road, south of the junction 8 of the M62. B2B8 development is currently under construction to the north of the site and there is open space to the west. Residential properties are located within the wider area to the east and further residential development is currently under construction to the south. The relevant planning history is detailed within section 5 of your report. Part of the site has previously consented for residential, retail and commercial development and would allow for the development of 317 properties on the southern portion of the application site. As this application, which is 2015-26469, has commenced, these properties are capable of being implemented and this is material to the current decision. It is also notable that the northern portion of the site was subject to outline planning permission for B1, B2 and B8 uses. This was subsequently followed by a Reserve Matters application for B2 and B8 uses on the far northern portion, and this is currently under construction. The application is before the MC tonight because it's departure from the development plan. The application was publicised by 34 neighbour notification letters, site notices and a press notice, and 3 objections were received as a result, and these are detailed within section 3.1 of your report. As members are aware, all planning applications must be determined in accordance with local planning policies unless other material considerations indicate otherwise. The relevant local planning policies are contained within the core strategy are set out within section 6 of the report. You will also see reference there to the proposed submission version of the local plan and clarification that only minimal weight should be attached to this. The key issues associated with development are the principle of development in terms of the loss of employment land and the acceptability of 300 net new dwellings and the relationship with the current housing land supply, the principle of mixed use area, the impacts on the highway network, residential amenity and ecology, and I'll look at each of these in turn. The site is allocated for employment uses within the adopted core strategy, and therefore this application is a departure to that. The Economic Development Needs Assessment, otherwise known as the EDNA 2019, identifies this site for B1 use. However, the EDNA recommends that this policy should not be prescriptive on the nature of B uses located on specific employment sites unless there are specific reasons for doing so, such as proximity to housing. It concludes there is demand for B2, B8 uses in Amiga, and these would need to be assessed should B1 use no longer be viable. The applicant has produced information relating to the marketing of the site for B1 uses dating back to 2007, and the interest has been extremely limited. The conclusions of the marketing assessment are contained within paragraph 8.13, and it is concluded that B1 office development is unlikely to be delivered in this location. Alternative employment uses, B2 and B8, consistent with planning policy, have been considered as part of this assessment, but it is considered these would not be viable due to noise-related issues and proximity to residential properties. On this basis, loss of employment land is considered acceptable in principle. An objection received has raised the issue of prematurity for reasons set out within paragraphs 3.23 and 8.23 and 8.27 of your report. These are not accepted. In considering the principle of development in terms of acceptability of 200 net new dwellings and the relationship to housing land supply, it's important to recognise that there has been a significant under-delivery of homes in the borough over the last 3 years, measured against our delivery targets of over 50%, which equates to a shortfall in the delivery of 1,226 homes. Furthermore, Warrington is not currently able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply as required by the NPPF, and therefore the relevant development plan policies are considered out of date, and applications meeting the criteria for sustainable development should be granted planning permission, with the exception of where any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework as a whole. The fact that a proportion of the site was excluded from the SHLA does not mean that it cannot be considered for housing development. The SHLA forms the basis on which the council measures itself against housing land supply, and should the site be identified as developable, it could potentially contribute towards these targets. Furthermore, the council's local housing market need assessment identifies repeated shortfalls in the delivery of affordable housing. The table in paragraph 8.33 of the report demonstrates that this has been a trend over the last 5 years. 25% of the proposed units will be affordable across the site, and this will be secured by Section 106 agreement. While this is below the required 30% stipulated in the obligations SPD, the figure is an amalgamation of the 20% established under the extant permission and 30% for the remainder of the site. The range of uses proposed in the mixed use area are reflective of those previously approved in the extent consent, which remains capable of implementation. It is considered that the scale and range of uses would not undermine the vitality or viability of nearby centres. The impacts of the proposal on the highway network have been fully assessed. Highways England have been consulted due to the proximity to Junction 8 of the M62 and are not objected to subject to the conditions. The new proposed site access will operate satisfactorily and the impact on the wider local highway network will be minimal. There are no technical objections to the proposal, subject to Section 106 to secure funding to support public transport and conditions set out in the report, including improvements to Junction 8 and to the new roundabout at Fairchild Road. The benefits of the site in terms of the ability to link into walking and cycling routes are recognised. The application has been considered in terms of the relationship to the existing residential properties and the potential impacts of the existing employment uses on the proposed development, as well as those relating to the mixed-use development. It is considered that uses could be implemented without adverse impacts on residential amenity subject to conditions. In terms of ecology, the application has been fully assessed by the Greater Manchester Ecology Unit, having consideration to mitigation already provided for the wider site to date, and that's detailed within paragraph 8.75 of your report. And therefore, there are no objections subject to additional site-specific conditions. The application proposes social infrastructure secured by section 106 on the basis of net increase of 300 dwellings. Sums associated with the 317 homes on the extent permission have already been paid. Details of infrastructure are contained within paragraph 8.52 and 8.70 of your report and include on-site equipped play space, contributions of almost £2 million towards primary and secondary school places, the securing of space for a new GP surgery and commuted sum of £771 per residential unit to support health facilities, 25% affordable housing across the entire site, consisting of discount market housing for sale, intermediate housing and affordable housing, schemes for the delivery of public art, sports and playing pitch contributions totalling over £500,000. In addition, the application will grant outline consent for a care home facility for which there is an identified need within the borough. For the reasons set out here, the application is therefore recommended for approval subject to section 106 and conditions, should the Secretary of State not wish to intervene. We currently have a holding direction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nikki. I can confirm that we've received a written representation from Richard Purser from RPC Planning on behalf of Metacre Limited. You'll have noted that this representation exceeded the word limit, but it is for both items 4 and 5, and also it's the only representation for item 4 that arrived on time, so I have allowed it. I will now ask members of the committee to confirm that they have read and understood these representations. Councillor Barr.
I have read and understood the representations.
Thank you. Councillor Carey.
I confirm, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Friend.
I confirm, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
I also confirm, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mundry.
I confirm, Chair.
That's right. Councillor Parish.
I confirm, Chair.
Councillor Wheeler. Are you struggling with the contact?
Confirm, Chair.
Oh, good. Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Confirm, Chair.
Okay, and I confirm I've read and understood them as well. I confirm these representations will be included in the minutes of this meeting. I will now invite comments and questions to officers from members in turn. Councillor Barr, have you got any questions?
I have some concern that this application has come to us without adequate consultation with the public, and that the Omega Partnership has not met for 2 years, as Councillor Parish told us before the meeting, which I think is quite wrong. Also, the scale of change that is being considered here, I think, goes beyond the scope of our committee alone. Past history had developments on this scale presented to all member briefings prior to coming to Development Management Committee. But specifically on the application, I am concerned about paragraph 8.67, which is the meagre provision of affordable housing. I know that paragraph 8.68 explains the 25% blended rate, which is an amalgamation of the lower 20% rate on the previous application and a 30% rate on this application, but I'm concerned that the 10% of units for discount market sale will only be affordable at the first acquisition. They will sort of then revert to full market housing, which I think is problematic. And I think 15% for intermediate and for affordable rent isn't enough. What I would have liked to have seen is some relationship between the housing demand of employees on and around the Omega site and the affordability of this housing, because the big advantage of this housing is that it allows people to walk or cycle to work on the Omega site. But I'm not assured by the report that actually this housing will be available to them at a price that they can afford. So my question is to Nikki, is there anything that can be done about the affordable housing element, or about keeping that housing affordable in perpetuity?
Nikki?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the 2 questions there, as you just outlined, Councillor Barr. First of all, in terms of perpetuity, so yes, that housing will be affordable in perpetuity, and that'll be secured through to section 106. The other issue, which is it affordable for local employees, and that is the nature of employment of affordable housing is set at a national level, so it will meet national standards for affordable housing.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
You want to come back, Councillor Barr? Did that answer your question?
No, I'm not happy with the answer on the national figures. And Nikki is quite right, and she's doing her job by advising us what the regulations say. But I'm expressing a degree of concern at the regulations that they don't take local principles, local circumstances into account. And I think it's going to be absolutely ridiculous if Omega generates a commuter flow of people through Warrington West Station in and out every day because employees on Omega will not be able to afford houses in this development. So I'm unhappy about that, but I understand the planning circumstances that Nikki has explained to us. Thank you, Chair.
Can you come back on that, Nikki? Is there anything that can be done?
I don't think there's any need. I think Nikki has said what she needs to say.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carey, have you got a comment on or a question?
Yes, Chair. I go along with the earlier comments of Councillor Barr that the consultation has been lacking on this particular application. We haven't heard anything for some time about the development on this site, even though the principle of development was approved many years ago. This application on its own, I might be able to come to terms with, but when you take it alongside the next application based in St Helens, I start to have major concerns about the traffic that is likely to be generated passing through the residential areas of West Warrington, and to me that is a major issue. The officers might be a bit relaxed about what the roads can cope with, but I think when the residents start to see large increases in HGVs travelling through the area, they're going to start to express their concerns. And I think it's time that we had an overall update and briefing on this before being asked to make further major decisions. As I say, I can come to terms with the application number 4 that's before us, but I certainly can't with application number 5 because I think that has a much greater impact on the area. So from my point of view, I'm looking to see if members would want to defer certainly the second application later on. Comments on this particular one, I accept that residential use in place of business use is something that has benefits as well as disbenefits, and I can probably come to terms with that, but not with the second application.
Okay. Do any officers want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think there's 2 elements here. I think I can gather that councillors are talking about, and there's one is the statutory consultation that has gone into these applications and gone into this application, and that is so the consultation that's occurred with neighbour notification letters, site notice, press notice, that meets the statutory requirements, and that's sufficient for us to proceed with the decision. But I think the wider concern there is the just the general information that's circulated from the site developers, and I just wonder if you confirm whether my interpretation of what is being said there is correct.
Yes, it is the strategic issue of how the whole area is going to develop.
Yeah. So
yeah, if I could make a point, you add at the end of reports the constructive engagement between the planning officers and the applicants, and you have a standard paragraph that comes into our reports for that. There is a section in NPPF that says that applicants are expected to have a proper consultation with the public. Now, it's an advisory aspect of NPPF, but it's not a compulsory aspect of NPPF, and I think think it's a material matter for us, firstly, whether officers ask the developers to do that and when developers refuse. That was the case with the Appleton Stobart's application, where the applicants were proud of not having consulted the local community. Well, I think that is completely unacceptable and outrageous, and I think as a committee we should be entitled to take into account people ignoring recommendations in NPPF when it suits them, and then picking up recommendations in NPPF when it suits their application.
In terms of, sorry, Chair, would you like me to respond to that?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So in terms of this application, we've got sufficient information that to make a decision, and the consultation, the statutory consultation, which is necessary to making the decision, has taken place. Now, as you say there, Councillor Barr, there is an advisory note within the NPPF that states that developers should engage with the public prior to submissions taking place. But as you also say there, it isn't compulsory and can't be enforced. Notwithstanding that, we recognise the issues that developers, especially large-scale developments, can raise for residents who haven't maybe fully been made briefed on such applications. And this has come from yourselves tonight, and it's also something we've picked up on through the course of the consultation responses on the current applications. So we are in discussions with the developers at the moment, just to see. I think they used to have a better relationship in that sense. So although that sits outside of this planning application process and outside the statutory requirements, we are engaging with them at the moment to see what else can be done.
Thank you. Councillor Friend, have you got a comment or a question for officers?
Yes, I have, Chair. Thank you. I would echo the comments of Councillor Barr and Councillor Carey, and I do not accept the low figure of affordable housing. If they want 20% in the first phase, and in the second phase they should have 40% to make an overall of 30%. 30% is the minimum. This committee some time ago drew a red line and said we wouldn't approve applications that didn't give us the full allocation of affordable housing. So I'm very disappointed with the affordable housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do you wish to come back on that, Nikki?
Yeah, I would just say in this particular instance, just to reiterate, there is an extant planning permission on the southern part of the site, which means that 317 of those houses could be built without the consent which we're currently assessing, and that allows 20% housing, sorry, 20% affordable housing, and that is material to this decision. So I mean, it's just the way that the red line has been drawn for the purposes of this application includes that site, but equally it could have been submitted without it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from Councillor Morgan?
Excuse me, Chair. I am upset as Councillor Friend and Councillor Carey, and I think Councillor Friend's just intimated towards it. The lack of discussion we've had, I think it should have been discussed at least at an all-member meeting. Something that, you know, things of this magnitude just can't be thrust upon us like this. I'm also concerned and agree with Councillor Friend on the percentage of the affordable housing. It's all right getting an answer saying it could be. There's a vast difference in could be and would be, so I'm not too happy there either.
Thank you. Have you any further comments to add, Nikki?
I think this, in terms of the all-member briefing, we have we've briefed the lead and the deputy before planning committee on these issues. But in terms of an all-member briefing, I wasn't aware of any requirements of that, so I apologise if that hasn't taken place, and it should have done. And in terms of these kind of events moving forward, Chair, maybe we could have a separate discussion about when they may be necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Mundry, have you got any questions for officers or comments?
Just one comment. I agree with all the councillors that have spoke before me, and you know, we should have have an update on this and have a proper meeting to see and discuss it properly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parish, have you got any questions or comments?
Yes, Chair, thank you. If you understand the affordable housing issue right, it can't be the full allocation because there's already consented plans with a different figure with other part of the site. In terms of we should have had a briefing, certainly over the next item, I think so, but I think this one's a bit more, dare say, a bit more domestic, and obviously it's balancing providing housing which are much needed with a loss of employment land, and some of the objectors have queried that, so be glad of a clarification. I think it's in the report already, but just to clarify why this can't still be used as employment land. And on a more technical one, I did raise privately the Highways England comments about the improvements at Skyline Drive at Junction 8. The update report says those conditions 13 and 14 have been removed because condition 19 deals with the same ones. But can I ask why it's anything to do with Highways England? And I'm presuming now this application, there's no requirement for improvements at Junction 8. It is just the connection at Burtonwood Road opposite Kingswood Road that's of concern.
Okay, can we take Steve's second question first? Mike, do you want to comment on that?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, because of the site's proximity to Junction 8, Councillor, it's Highways England would be consulted. Any impact on the motorway network, they would automatically be consulted. They obviously are very sensitive about potential issues on the off-slip junctions, because obviously any issues on the circulatory carriageway at Junction 8 can quickly affect the main line. And so they were part of the pre-application process in terms of the preparation of the transport assessment that was carried out, and a thorough transport assessment was carried out, including an assessment of Junction 8. That flagged up some potential concerns about the westbound off-slip overall in the area, and like you say, that it is partly linked to the application that's coming up.
But it's gone from this application anyway.
No, it's still included in this one, but there's a trigger of the 318th dwelling on this. So this, you know, it won't come till later on in the process in terms of this one.
But if there's a condition on this, who would an agreement on this application? Who would be paying for those improvements?
The developer.
Sorry,
the developer.
Because that gets confusing. Because the next item, it sounds like whoever's the developer of St Helens, the St Helens application, will be paying for those improvements.
That's right. Whichever comes first in terms of the trigger point.
Okay.
Nobody will want to get to the trigger point, will they? Because wait for the other one to do it.
It's the same developer.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Can we go to Steve's first question, Nikki? That's about the non-viability of the B1, B2, and B8 use of the land.
So in terms of the loss of the justification for the loss of employment land, so that's included within paragraphs 8.8 to 8.14 in your report, and essentially the applicant has submitted a marketing report. So in accordance with the NPPF, if you could claim that a use for it isn't suitable for its allocation, you need to justify that, you need to prove that in effect. So they've provided a marketing report which demonstrates that this site has been marketed for employment uses since 2007, and there's been very little interest whatsoever for office use on the site. So on that basis, it would appear likely after over 10 years, nothing has come forward, no interest on the site. It's considered unlikely any time in the near future that circumstance would change. And that follows a national trend for relatively small scale office developments just don't seem to have marketability. So then that takes us to other employment uses, which would be B2 and B8. And we've assessed those, it says in the report, we've assessed those in terms of whether they would be suitable on this site, but because of the proximity to residential properties and the noise that would be created, the orientation that would be involved, it was considered they also wouldn't be, that it was not, the land isn't suitable for those purposes either. And in that case, then that the loss of employment land is considered to be acceptable in principle.
Okay, does that answer your question, Steve?
I think it does. Can I just make another point though? In terms of the change of use to residential, members will be aware that the government seems intent on permitted development rights to let you do whatever you like, basically, in terms of housing. And would I be right in thinking the developer could actually build offices as intended on this site and then, without further planning consent, turn them into residences?
I think before we got to that stage, I think we would need to think about what the potential of that to be. And the applicant has stated, because there's been no market interest in the site, they wouldn't be applying speculatively for this site. So the potential for that to occur here would be extremely limited. Okay,
I don't think they might just build offices that look like houses and then just convert them to houses later. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler, have you got any comments or questions for officers?
Thank you, Chair. I think, a lot of discussion is points I sort of did concur with, but the fact that this B1 use has been marketed since 2007, there comes a time when you have to move on and think what you do with the site. So the outline, if this, and if you went on to reserve matters, could be a lovely development. If it, in an ideal world, if it worked, it could work very well. But I think my main concerns are probably the lack of affordable housing, because, as Councillor Barr said, we don't want people being bused to Central Station every morning on the Amazon bus. We want them to be cycling or walking home. Maybe that's a pipe dream, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think they're very important points. Have you got any comments to make on those, Nikki?
I think, just as Councillor Wheeler says, then in terms of the detailed design, Councillor Wheeler indicated that it could, this development has got the potential to work well in its locality and to relate well both to the surrounding residential and to the public open space that's been designed to the west. In terms of the concern for affordable housing, again, just to reiterate those points, that it just does relate to national definitions of affordable housing.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just come in on that?
Sorry, is that
it's
Councillor Carey?
No,
oh no, it's sorry,
insulting Councillor Carey.
Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, just a couple of points on the affordable housing, Chair. As Nikki says, yes, the definitions are national, but the definitions do set prices based on the local market. So affordable rent is, for example, 80% of the local market rent. So there is that low, the rents are not set in relation to some expensive area in the south of the country. They are related to Warrington area market values. So there is an element of local pricing involved. And in terms of the affordable housing, I just wanted to be clear that the additional housing over and above what already has got outline consent, the 30% target is being met, is my understanding, that we are getting approximately 30% of the additional housing. It's just that when you take into account the housing which already has permission with the 20% affordable housing, that's where overall you get your 25% from. But in terms of the extra 300 or so houses, we are getting approximately 30% of those will be affordable. I think that's right, isn't it, Nikki?
That's right, Paul.
Yes.
Yeah. Chair.
Thank you.
Can I just ask Paul and or Nikki, because Nikki said that all the affordable housing will be affordable in perpetuity. Surely that only applies to intermediate and the affordable rent. The discount market sale housing reverts to a normal market sale on resale, doesn't it?
Nikki?
we could put a requirement within section 106 for that to be in perpetuity.
I would be grateful if we could do that.
Thank you. Councillor Wright, thank you for waiting patiently. Have you got any comments or questions for officers?
I did have, but I think they've been discussed. I had concerns about the affordability of the housing and prematurity, and of course the employment land. But I think my questions have been answered, but I share the concerns of the councillors already spoken.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back round again and see if people would like to make additional comments. Councillor Barr.
No additional comments, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Carey.
No more comments, Chair.
Councillor Friend.
None at this time, thanks, Chair.
Councillor Morgan.
Nothing further at this moment, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Mundry.
No more comments, Chair.
Councillor Parish.
Only to observe that it's obviously a balance here, and there's been plenty of complaints about the size of the buildings at the northwest end of Burton, well, this side of the motorway next to Burton Road. So obviously housing means it's less visible and it provides housing, so it is a balance on this thing, I think.
Councillor Wheeler.
No, Chair, only to say that obviously this is a departure from the development plan, and minimum wage is given to the PSV. Oh, can't remember. I've got my initials now. PSVLP. And while this is a one-off, my concerns might be that we might get other one-offs in the future, and we can't sort of assess the cumulative impact. But that's not for now. I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Wright, have you got any further comments?
No further comments.
Okay, thank you. Do any officers want to make any further points of clarification?
No, thank you, Chair.
Chair, if I could, Mike Taylor.
Yes.
Just to touch on something that Councillor Wheeler raised in terms of sustainable transport, and I just point out that the 300 or so houses that have already got consent, there's no commitment to provide additional bus services for those. But on the back of this proposal, we've took the opportunity to seek funding, which is detailed in paragraph 8.4 of your report, for a new bus service which will serve the whole wider Omega residential area.
Okay, thank you. It's a good point. Right. Well, we've had a good discussion on this. There's a lot of points been raised and a lot of concerns. I can't say that I've got a clear sort of steer, so I'm going to propose the motion that the application is approved, and we'll see what comes out of that. I'll now see if I can get a seconder. Councillor Barr.
I'm not willing to second the motion.
No. Councillor Carey.
I'll second the motion, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carey. So the motion is. Sorry.
Councillor Parish, can we have with the amendment of that about
I'm just going to ask for amendments.
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion is proposed and seconded. Are there any amendments to the motion? Steve?
I was expecting Bob Barr to say it.
Yes, no, well, it's as Nikki suggested, that the discount should remain in perpetuity. So the discount will be applied to future sales of those properties.
Okay. Is that amendment seconded?
I will second that, Chair. Steve Parish.
So Steve Parish has seconded that amendment.
Chair, if you as the mover of the motion are accepting of that proposal, you can just adopt it. You don't have to vote.
Yes, yes, I've remembered that for once. And yes, I accept the amendment. So the motion is that the application is approved with the amendment that the housing that's for sale is the lower cost in perpetuity. Okay, so can we have a vote on that motion now, Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Barr.
Reluctantly for.
Councillor Carey.
For.
Councillor Friend.
For.
Councillor Grime.
For.
Councillor Morgan.
Very reluctantly for.
Councillor Mundry.
For.
Councillor Parish.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
And Councillor Wright.
For.
Thank you. The application is approved with the additional amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We come to item 5. This is application 2020-36461. Omega Zone 8, west of Omega South and south of the M62, and this is in St Helens. So this is an adjacent authority application from St Helens Council. The erection of a B8 logistics warehouse with ancillary offices, associated car parking, infrastructure and landscaping, and also outline planning permission for manufacturing B2 and logistics B8 development, also with ancillary offices and associate access infrastructure work. Detailed matters of appearance, landscaping, layout and scale are reserved for subsequent approval in this outline part of the planning permission. The code for St Helens is, I think, given there. Yes, that is P 2020-0061. The recommendation is to raise no objections subject to conditions and S106 obligations. Can I invite the development manager to present a report?
Thank you, Chair. The application is presented to members at the request of the Director of Growth, given the scale of the proposed development. The application is a hybrid application, part full, B8, and part outline, B2 and B8, with ancillary works. The application has been submitted to St Helens and is located entirely within their administrative boundary. Warrington have been notified as an adjacent authority. This is a large site of over 75 hectares within the St Helens Greenbelt and will be accessed via Catalina Way off Skyline Drive in Warrington. The full application has identified end users. The full application has identified an end user whose specific requirements relating to automated storage and racking systems has led to the proposed scale of development, which would be a maximum of 41 metres high. The location of this in relation to the outline elements are contained within plans on pages 84 and 85 of your report. St Helens is the determining authority of responsibility for statutory consultation. Notwithstanding this, we have also consulted by means of neighbour notification letter, site notice and press notice, and 16 objections have been received, as well as objections from Sankey Parish Council and Cultures and Glaisbury Parish Council, and these are summarised in paragraph 4.3 of your report. It will be in the intention to forward all of these representations to St Helens to ensure that the views of Warrington residents and businesses are taken into account in the decision-making process. In our role as neighbouring authority, we should assess the material impacts of the development on our borough. St Helens will subsequently assess the application against their planning policies, taking into account all of the material considerations. Looking through the issues then, first of all, in terms of the principal and employment uses. The council entered into a statement of common ground with St Helens in 2019 in preparation for both councils emerging local plans that 31.22 hectares of their proposed employment allocations will count towards Warrington's employment need. So in effect, Warrington's employment need will be provided within the St Helens boundary at some point in the future on the basis of this statement of common ground. While this may need to be reviewed and updated to reflect our current position, it would remain the case that the area of employment land subject to this application would breach these requirements, taking into account St Helens' own need and that of Warrington on an evidence base. So in effect, the 75 hectares obviously exceeds the 31 hectares, which was in the statement of common ground. However, St Helens has indicated that the remaining site area will contribute to identified unmet need in the Liverpool City region, and it is recommended that Warrington seek assurances on such matters within its representation. The potential benefits to Warrington residents in terms of access to additional employment opportunities as a result of proximity are recognised through this application. The application site is wholly within the Green Belt, and in addition to the local policies, St Helens will need to consider the details contained within the NPPF in the decision-making process. In the event that they are minded to approve the application, it will need to be referred to the Secretary of State before a decision can be made to establish whether they wish to intervene. It is recommended that our response to St Helens emphasises the importance of compliance with the NPPF. The application has been subject to a capacity assessment to look at highway implications, and this indicates that minimal impact on the surrounding highway. There will be minimal impact on the surrounding highway network, subject to mitigation to be secured by condition. The assessments take into account committee developments, but do not take into account B1 trips associated with Amiga Warrington, as it is the applicant's intention to provide St Helens with a legal agreement which will prohibit the development of such under outline application 2017-30371. The decision on the previous agenda item would have no bearing on that whatsoever. Consideration has been given to on-street car parking issues prevalent in Amiga, and it is recommended that conditions be requested to ensure parking restrictions similar to those in the area currently. A section 106 is also recommended to secure contribution towards public transport within Warrington and a travel plan for a minimum of 10 years. In terms of the character, Amiga currently comprises a number of buildings of significant scale, and they are comparable to those proposed by the outline application, although it's accepted that at 41 metres the unit proposed as part of the full planning application is of a greater scale than the existing buildings. To put that in context, the units currently under construction in phase 2 at junction 8 are approximately 18 metres tall. Whilst it's accepted the developments will have an urbanising effect within the St Helens, it is not considered that an objection to the application should be raised on these grounds, and is subject to St Helens being satisfied the harm caused to the character of the area is outweighed by the benefit of granting planning permission. In terms of residential amenity, the amenity of Warrington residents has been considered, looking at noise, lighting, overshadowing and outlook, and the development is capable of being delivered without significant harmful effects subject to conditions. The application indicates a commitment to generating power through sustainable means, and it's recommended that this is highlighted to St Helens to ensure that measures are implemented and the impacts on climate change are maximised. To recap then, in terms of a recommendation as stated within paragraph 10.2 of your report, it's recommended the response to St Helens Borough Council raises no objection to the proposed development subject to the following requirements. Assurances that agreement is in place with the Liverpool City region regarding the 44.08 hectares of employment land and unmet need for strategic B8 uses within the wider Liverpool City region. Determination of the application in accordance with the policy on green belt development in the National Planning Policy Framework. Financial contributions from the applicant towards public transport improvements and travel plan coordination through section 106 agreement between St Helens, OWL and WBC, and that would be £180,000 per year for 5 years as funded towards diversion enhancement of the B52 service to allow suitable connection for public transport, and a figure of £10,000 per year for a minimum period of 10 years to allow a coordinated approach to travel planning and alignment with the existing Amiga travel plan. A commitment from OWL not to undertake any further development on the Amiga Warrington site under planning permission 2017-30371 that would result in vehicle trips associated with the B1A office, reducing the capacity of the local highway network. A commitment to explore opportunities to reduce the development's impact upon climate change through sustainable measures. And planning permission be granted subject to conditions set out in section 11 of the report, which I think is now updated within, amended through the update report which has been circulated, to ensure impacts upon the local highway network and amenities of local residents and adjoining businesses are adequately addressed. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. I confirm that we've received written representations from Mr. Kay Cleave, an objection to the loss of greenbelt land and traffic on Warrington roads, and also from Richard Purser on behalf of Metacre. This was a joint objection to both 4 and 5, which I referred to before. It's not actually an objection to the B8 use as such, but it's an objection on the grounds of prematurity as items 4 and 5 are strongly linked. I'll now ask members of the committee to confirm that they've read and understood these representations. Councillor Barr.
Thank you, Chair. Read and understood.
Councillor Carey.
I confirm, Chair.
Councillor Friend.
I confirm, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
Confirm, Chair.
Councillor Mundry.
Confirm, Chair.
Councillor Parish.
Yes, Chair, confirm.
Councillor Wheeler.
Confirm, Chair.
Councillor Wright.
Confirm, Chair.
And I've also read and understood them. I confirm these representations will be included in the minutes of this meeting. I will now invite comments and questions from members to the officers. We can start with Councillor Carey this time.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I can't support the recommendation of making no objections to St Helens. The issues that are bothering me are, firstly, the lack of public consultation, the fact that we've only had this presented to us in a routine report, and we, the planning committee, have not had an up-to-date briefing on what's going on in the Westbrook area, with this in addition to item 4, which we've already dealt with. In addition to this application, there are other things going on in the west of Warrington, and a lot of people are currently talking about the development at Gulliver's World. So there's lots of issues in that area now that need to be brought together, and I think that something's got to be done before we go on approving things in a piecemeal fashion. So that was the first issue. The second issue is, I believe that around Warrington there is an existing green buffer between us and every other local authority that we adjoin. It's imperative that we keep that green buffer, and this, unfortunately, is biting into that and reducing it to an urban sprawl. And I don't want to see that happening in any part of the borough. So I do have an interest in seeing that maintained. And the final point is the traffic impact. I know the highways assessment is that the roads have the capacity, but I don't think the local population would necessarily agree with that when at peak times there's long tailbacks, and we're getting it quite a lot at the moment because of the amount of roadworks that are going on in the area. So having HGVs passing through what are essentially residential areas to the south of this site, it's not a good thing, and it's not one that I would support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carey. Do you want to reply to any of those points, either Nikki or Mike?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think if we just go through them in turn, so I think first of all, Councillor Carey, you raised the issue there of the lack of public consultation, and just to reiterate that the statutory requirements for consultation within for this development are the duty of St Helens, but notwithstanding that, we have gone above and beyond in conducting our own consultation, and the representations that have been received are summarised within your committee report for information. And notwithstanding the recommendation that is put to planning committee tonight, it would be our intention in any case to forward those to St Helens to make sure that the views of local people are taken into consideration in the decision making process. The other thing, the next point there was it's a routine report, and it would be interesting to know what else is going on in the wider area. And I suppose there are two elements to that. So in terms of being a routine report and the time frames associated with that, when we are consulted on an application, it's very similar to when we consult as a local planning authority with local residents. We are given a particular time frame which we need to respond to that consultation request. So in this particular case, we've been given 3 weeks. So the plans have been amended. In accordance with those amendments, we've given 3 weeks, and that expires on the 7th of August. Now, if we were to make a representation after that date, well, providing that the application hadn't been determined or there'd been no resolution made at that point, St Helens would be duty bound to take that into account. But there can be no guarantees that we could have a briefing and receive further instructions from DMC before that decision is made. And currently we haven't got an indication of when precisely St Helens are looking to take their application to planning committee, but in July it was indicated, an August date was indicated, but we haven't had recent confirmation of that. And then just to look then at the other issue that you raised, which was about what else is going on recently, and I'm sure Mike's going to come on to this recently, because I think this relates primarily to highways issues. You talked about Gulliver's World, and I think what is within the report, and I'm sure Mike will reiterate, is that in taking into account this development, the assessments associated with that, the highways assessments associated with that, have to take into account other committed developments within the locality, and so they are taken into account as well. In terms of the green buffer, I think in terms of the imperative we retain the green buffer, and again this comes back down to a matter of principle, which is the principle of the green belt and what the purposes of the green belt are. Now the green belt in this particular instance is within the St Helens boundary, and therefore it is your officer's opinion that it is for them to make that, to draw those conclusions about whether it complies with local and national planning policy. And ultimately, because of the scale of the development in Greenbelt, it will need to be referred to the Secretary of State to assess whether they wish to call the application in. I think, Mike, have you got anything further to add there on traffic impacts?
Thanks, Nikki. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify, just to reiterate what Nikki said, I mean, when the applications come in, they do take account of what development has been committed, i.e. what development has got planning consent already, or that we think is relevant, that is likely to affect it. There's a full transport assessment accompanying the application. The primary movements for employees are focused towards Junction 8, and notwithstanding Councillor Carey's concerns about roads to the south, the distribution of movements to and from the site has been taken from existing data from existing employees within the Omega Warrington workplace area. So all the employees within existing Omega, where they travel to and from, and the primary movement is eastbound towards Manchester, and HGV movement, again, because of the proximity to Junction 8, the primary movement for HGVs is going to be along Skyline Drive towards Junction 8. And like I say, there's been a full transport assessment, including Junction 8, and we're satisfied with the results.
Thank you, Mike.
Chair, could I just come back on that, please?
Certainly, I was just going to ask you.
Thank you. What I'm trying to get across to the officers is that this is a major set of proposals combined with others that are going on in the area, and the normal 3-week turnaround that is being looked for is all well and good in respect of normal planning applications. These are not normal. These are massive in terms of their impact on the area, and I think from that point of view, we as a council need to be doing more, if not for the public, certainly for the members of this committee, because such a lot is changing. We as councillors who are making the decisions need to be briefed to a much deeper level than we are being on major applications. And I think it's not a case of fitting in with the few weeks time frame that we normally deal with. It's a case of looking ahead and saying these are coming forward, and this is the way it's going to impact West Warrington or whichever other area that is being considered. So from that point of view, I think I'm asking for something more than we currently do when these sorts of applications arise. And all I would say on the traffic, Mike, is when everything's moving smoothly, I don't disagree with you. The capacity's there and everybody's happy. But when that M62 or the M6 gets clogged, that traffic's got to go somewhere, and it goes through the residential areas. So that's my final word on it.
Thank you. Do you wish to make any reply, officers?
I think in terms of the 3-week turnaround being insufficient, I take your point there, Councillor Curry, but I hope through the explanation they've given previously that you understand the rationale for that. I think in terms of the wider issues for West Warrington that are coming through, I think there's a briefing that is necessary for other applications in the future, and to forecast other developments that we might see coming through. We could have a separate conversation about that and how we can facilitate that.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Friend, have you got any comments or questions for officers?
No further comments or questions, just to echo a lot of what Councillor Carey's just said. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Morgan, have you got any comments or questions for officers?
No questions. My comments would be the same as my two colleagues that have just spoken. I think Councillor Carey has put it very, very eloquently. I couldn't put it better myself. I would find great difficulty in supporting this. I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mundry, have you any comments or questions for officers?
No comments or questions, Chair.
Councillor Parish.
Thank you, Chair. I need guidance on, if we don't like it, what we can do, because the recommendation is merely to raise no objections, and obviously it sounds like we do have objections. It's the extent of who deals with some of the various things on the report, and we're raising objections about the impact in Warrington of traffic and things like that. So I need to ask as well what we can say about the impact within St Helens. For instance, the ecology report, the 936 on the agenda at page 73, does just say that that's just up to St Helens essentially, but the fact is that it does destroy woodland, it does destroy at least 2 ponds. Don't know how old they are, so there's whether we have anything to say about the impacts in St Helens, and not least the height of the building. I've looked at these plans, and I'm trying to get my head around the scale. There's no measurements on the plans we've got, and I have to say, unless the lower part of the building is absolutely a lot bigger than it appears to be, I'm not sure I believe that's showing a building 41 metres high. 41 metres high is higher than, for people familiar with Warrington building, is higher than Peninsula House. It's 25 feet higher than the Tower of St Anne's, the old St Anne's church next to Tesco. It is a huge building, and I'm just wondering to what extent we're allowed to actually say things like that to St Helens. Can I leave it there? I've got another couple of items, if I may, Chair, but can I leave it those two for the moment?
Thank you. Nikki, have you got any answer to make, or perhaps Paul, on what sort of things we can make comments to St Helens on? And is the height of the building correct? I think Councillor Parish asked that.
I have some doubts about the plan, the site, what we're looking at. Yeah.
So in terms of what we can take into account then, Chair, as an adjacent authority on this application, primarily our role is to safeguard the interests of Warrington Borough in our consideration of the application, and therefore we have looked to narrow our issues to those that are concerned with the impacts on Warrington. Now there are other issues that maybe ordinarily, if it was an application within our borough, that we might raise concerns on, such as the height of development, 41 metres. I believe that has been checked and that is correct. So there might be, but ultimately it is the officer's view that that is for consideration by St Helens against their policies and against national planning policy. If you wanted to raise a comment on that, by all means we could raise a comment on that, but I wouldn't recommend raising an objection on that basis. Okay,
thank you.
Chair,
can I come back to you, Steve? Have you got any further comments?
Yeah, thank you for that. There is a proposal that we should have a pedestrian and cycle bridge across the M62 from Omega North to Omega South, and one of the issues the officers said that there's no funding for that. So I'm just wondering whether we actually try to negotiate some funding for that out of this application, because I can't see any other developments, well, there might, you never know these days, that might fund that. And it doesn't say it on the application, but the previous one would be subject to a potential call-in by the Secretary of State. Would St Helens' application be possibly called in by the Secretary of State?
Yes, Nicky's already raised that point.
It has, I missed that.
It almost certainly will be called in. And I think we're already getting, is it 10,000 a year for buses that we've asked for? Nicky, can you?
No, I wasn't sure about buses. That's another.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just a couple of issues there to clarify. So it's £10,000 per year towards the travel plan for a minimum of 10 years. And just something to clarify there, which you said, which just stated there, Chair, was regarding calling by the Secretary of State, just to make it clear that it would be referred to the Secretary of State for them to determine whether it will be called in. At this stage, we don't know whether it will be called in.
Thank you for that clarification.
And the bridge over the M62.
Mike, is that something you can respond on?
Thanks, Nicky. Thanks, Chair. I mean, obviously, members will be aware there's a council desire to create some form of crossing link in Omega North and Omega South, particularly for pedestrians and cyclists, just to improve their overall accessibility and to take away the barrier that Junction 8 potentially forms. Yeah. It's something that has been raised with Highways England and with St Helens, and we are cooperating towards looking at the feasibility of that. Highways England have actually appointed a consultant to carry out a study into that. But at the present time, there is no funding and no commitment for that. And it would be unreasonable to put it on this application as a whole, particularly given that this site does link across to St Helens via the existing public right-of-way footbridge further to the west. It's really one probably for the future, and it's probably late in the day as well for us to try and raise that with the developer. Also, notwithstanding that, the capital costs involved will be a major factor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wheeler, have you got any comments or questions?
Thank you, Chair. I think major concerns about the potential loss of the green belt, which I know the green belt is in St Helens, but as Nicky said, we are assessing this application on the impact to the residents of Warrington, and particularly West Warrington. And as Councillor Carey said, that green belt is a buffer, and I think it's essential it's preserved. And what I am concerned about is that what seems to be driving this is speculative development proposals from Home Bargains, TJ Morris. And I know they're doing very well at the moment, and hopefully they will continue to do so. But this seems to me that we are seeking, and St Helens are pushing this because of the economic drive from one developer. And once you've granted that planning permission is there in perpetuity. So I just wonder if Nicky's got any comments on that, the developer-led side of this.
So just to clarify on that point, Councillor Wheeler, so the full planning permission element of this hybrid scheme has identified an end user, and that is TJ Morris. That is they're committed to delivering that site, and the speculative then is potentially for their use in the future, but not necessarily so.
Thank you. Can I just come back on that, Chair?
Of course.
So a developer wants it because they think they can occupy it, but that's not guaranteed.
So the element that is subject to full planning permission is not speculative. That has got an end user.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And that's the one to the north. That's the northern half of that strange anvil shape, and the bit to the south is speculative.
Yeah. Right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wright, have you got any comments or questions for officers?
I think most of it's been said. I think I'm worried about the green belt, the impact that will have on Warrington, that buffer, losing that buffer. Well, yeah, I do believe that.
Steve, we've lost you.
It's back. I'm struggling with the internet, so I think I'm back now. Yeah.
Yeah, you're back.
I think we should have had more time to look at it. I have made representations in the past about the way we alert people to things like this, and we do the minimum, I think. And I think in matters like these, we should go a bit further and try and make sure that people are fully aware of what's being proposed, rather than just a basic minimum. I think it deserves that on this scale. But yeah, I agree with the comments we've made before. I have difficulty supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Barr, can I go on to you? Have you any comments or questions for officers?
Yes, I have a couple. I've heard colleagues' views, and I share many of their concerns. I think the principal concern that I share is the lack of adequate consultation, and also the failure to look at Omega on both sides of the M6 as a holistic development, because I have a slight degree of sympathy with the planners and the developers in St Helens, having seen the success that Warrington has been able to make of Omega, and also the success that we've made of Omega by having not warehouses that were just pure people factories, but warehouses which use high-tech means to automate the warehousing process. I can understand why St Helens want a bit of that, and that's what this application is about. But there should have been a consultation about the whole of the Omega area and the whole area surrounding Junction 8. And I think that we are on a slightly sticky wicket wanting to defend St Helens Greenbelt. Whilst I agree that there is potentially ancient woodland there are ponds there, I don't think we've got enough environmental information there. The chances that Greenbelt issues would completely stop a St Helens bit of Omega doesn't strike me as being right. So my questions to Nikki are about the issues of items of common ground and our duty to cooperate with St Helens. And the reason I'm asking these is I'm very aware that when our last local plan was examined in public, one of the things that was really important was we were able to demonstrate that we were cooperating with neighbouring boroughs, and every borough sent in an assessment saying Warrington has complied with its duty to cooperate. I think it would be very unwise of us not to cooperate with St Helens at the present moment. So I'd like to Nikki's guidance on what does our duty to cooperate constitute in this case, and what have we already conceded as common ground?
So in terms of the draft local plan, there has, as it's set out within the report there has been a statement of common ground in relation to employment land. So Warrington couldn't provide the required level of employment land to fulfil its needs, and therefore an element of that has been given over to St Helens, and they were willing to take that up. Now, in effect, that more or less that equates to the area of land that is defined by the full planning permission. So this application goes above and beyond what that statement of common ground sets out. So then our query must then be to St Helens, okay, well, what about the remainder? This goes above and beyond. And we've raised that with them already. And what they're saying in relation to that, the additional area, is that they will meet a shortfall from the remainder of the Liverpool City region with that additional land, and there will be an additional statement of common ground in place with the remainder of the city region to justify that release. And again, if we look at the recommendation section, then there is within, I think it's, let's just have a look, point 1, the recommendation does seek assurances around those issues.
Right, that's very helpful, thank you.
Okay, in response to that that answer, I've got a question to raise myself, because I have been wondering, seeing St Helens presumably need employment, why they had actually placed this application. They'd chosen a part of the Greenbelt that was actually adjacent to Warrington and is providing jobs that are most easily accessed from Warrington. In fact, all the access is onto Warrington roads. I wondered why they hadn't put their application at the other end of the Greenbelt, providing jobs for St Helens. And I was concerned whether we were actually going to see that Greenbelt buffer between Warrington and St Helens gradually filling up, sort of following on from this this application. So can I ask Nikki, as far as you're aware, is the reason that this application is actually bang up against our boundary because St Helens have agreed to take over some of our land that we need for industry?
So that's exactly right, Chair. Yes. So it's nothing, as far as I'm aware, nothing to do with any future plans they might have for the wider Greenbelt area, but it's in terms of them taking our employment need capacity.
Right, thank you. I think we'll go through and ask councillors if they've got any more comments, and then I possibly might need to check something with legal about what our options are. But first, can I go back to Councillor Carey? Have you got any further comments or questions?
Not at this point, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Friend.
Not at this point, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan, any further comments or questions?
Not at this moment, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Mundry.
Not at this moment, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Parish.
Yes, Chair. Notwithstanding the fact that some of these things are of an impact in St Helens rather than here, I'm wondering if we can sort of make riders to the recommendations. First of all, the initial reason for recommendation on the report did say there'd be no impact on visual amenity for Warrington. I think a 41-metre high building will be seen from half of Warrington, frankly. So I disagree with that. I'm just wondering if we can say, I don't think, given that St Helens are likely to be dealing with this Friday and could do it without our comments, I think, though we don't like being rushed into this, we probably do need to make comments. So therefore, I'm just wondering how much, this is maybe one for the solicitor as well, just how much we can add as riders to the recommendation in terms of the visual amenity, the size of the building, the impact on the Greenbelt, and the impact on ecology, which, even though it's in St Helens, you know, some of the wildlife displaced may end up in Warrington.
Okay, have you got any comments, Nikki?
Councillor Parish, were you looking to direct that comment to Paul?
Well, the question is, can we do that in terms of adding to the recommendations at 10.1? Can we add riders to say these are the matters that the committee were concerned about, both in terms of impact in Warrington, the visual impact, and indeed the impact within St Helens?
Yeah. I think there are ways of expressing that. So I think if we recommend it, my advice would be that we still move towards the recommendation that is not to object to the proposal, subject to X, Y, and Z as set out within the committee reports, and request that St Helens give due regard to any additional concerns that you might have, rather than to objecting to those on an individual basis. And the reason I say that is because a couple of fold, really. I suppose that the policies that we look at for Greenbelt, if we look at Greenbelt for an example, the policies that we look at Greenbelt are the same policies that St Helens will look at for Greenbelt, and therefore we should be taking into account the same policies that they will take into account. So we should be quite uniform in our approach on such matters. And I suppose the other issues there, I suppose, would be, yes, 41 metres, and I outlined earlier, it's a substantial height, it's very tall building in the context of the surrounding. But notwithstanding that, if we're going to object to something, we'd need to demonstrate harm. If we were going to move towards an objection, there is a potential for this to be called in to the Secretary of State, and if that was the case, then we would look towards defending our position in that particular instance, that we have objected and that we think there will be a significant effect enough that we don't think that the benefits outweigh those detrimental impacts. So I think we would be right to raise those issues if you had concerns, but my recommendation would still be as set out within the report, notwithstanding that they look at other issues.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure which way is better. Probably the recommendation is obviously to not raise an objection, but to make these points by other means, and short of sitting down at a Conservative Party fundraiser with the Secretary of State.
Now.
I'm just thinking we probably ought to get a shot across the bows early on.
Thank you. The points you've raised actually were fairly similar to the ones I was thinking of raising, but I was actually going to ask Paul Clisby, has he got any comment to make at this stage about what our options are? Because obviously we do need to make our comment tonight. We can't put it off, although we think we've had very short time, or else we just risk not being taken into any account of at all. Paul, have you got any advice for us?
Well, obviously, in terms of that point, obviously I concur with that. Potentially, obviously, you could adjourn it for consideration and ask St Helens to hold off, but of course they would be under no obligation to do so, and potentially they could just go ahead and make the decision without your comments. So I would say, you have the information before you and you are able to submit comments. So I would recommend that you should do that. In terms of our role, I don't think I would deviate very much. I'm very wise not to deviate very much from what Nikki has said. Clearly, the reason we are consulted is because of your position in relation to Warrington. So that is that should obviously be your primary focus. And as Nikki has said, if the matter is called in, certainly in terms of an objection, the Secretary of State would expect us to go along and justify our position with evidence. So I concur with what Nikki's already said.
Thank you. But presumably we could, even if we raise no objection, we could add in giving due regard to our concerns about the traffic situation, which is obviously of great material consideration to Warrington, especially on the frequent occasions when there's some problem on the M62 or the M6.
Well, clearly there's a relationship between Warrington traffic and this site.
Okay.
Or will be.
Right. Carrying on though, giving opportunities to other members to speak. Councillor Wheeler, have you got any further comments or questions?
No further comments, Chair.
Councillor Wright, have you got any further comments or questions?
No further comments.
Not at this stage, thank you. Councillor Barr?
Just an observation, Councillor Parish. I don't find Peninsula House a very useful comparison, but I can give you a couple of comparisons. The cooling towers at Fiddler's Ferry are 114 metres high, as opposed to 141. The chimney at Fiddler's Ferry is 200 metres high, so it's 3/4 of the chimney at Fiddler's Ferry. What I would have found helpful actually would have been a comparison with the Asda warehouse, because that's a similar automated warehouse, which is the nearest tall building to the site on the south side of the site. But I certainly can't remember that being as high as this, but it was a relatively high automated building. I'm grateful to Nikki for her advice. I am inclined not to risk having to explain ourselves to the Secretary of State. I think that following the recommendation but adding comments appears to be an appropriate way forward tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I believe that the height of the building is 41 metres, not 41.
That's better. That's half a Fiddler's Ferry. So that's nowhere nearly so bad. Like quite short, really.
Are there any further comments from councillors in response to the latest things we've said? Have we got any further points of clarification from officers?
No, thank you, Chair.
Chair, if I may, I think we're moving to sort of accepting the recommendation of raising no objections, but in terms of the recommendations at 10.1, that's subject to the following requirements, and I think we're I hope we are sort of suggesting that we still ought to raise concerns that have been mentioned. My little list would be the height of the building and the visual impact from a lot of places in Warrington. You just imagine the view from Fox Covert, for instance. Others have raised the impact of traffic, especially when things go wrong on the motorways. But then there's also things which it may be that our colleagues at St Helens already have concerns about the ecology on the site. What the actual format of that would be, whether it's simply members of the committee also raise the following matters of great concern.
Thank you. I wonder if we should go ask each of the councillors that if we end up accepting the recommendation and adding a give due regard to our concerns about etc., what members think we should mention. So I've mentioned the traffic, especially when the traffic through Warrington, especially when the motorways are blocked. Steve's mentioned that, and also the height of this building. It's a very tall building. If I go through the councillors and ask if there's anything more you would want to mention if we decide to raise no objection. Does that make sense? Councillor Carey, have you any comments?
Yes, Chair. To me, this is a flawed application because we've been put in a position of approving it or putting up a major case against it. So the 3 points I made earlier, there has been no consultation. We've not had a briefing of the members of the planning committee to go through the finer detail of this. So that still stands. And whatever we comment afterwards, it makes no difference to that. The green buffer between the two local authorities is going to be eaten into. So if the plans stay as they are and we don't object, there's no change there either. And the traffic situation, you can't really change it because it's there in black and white. It's coming through Warrington. There's no access from St Helens. So adding a comment about that, it's not going to achieve anything. So my simplest solution to this is to simply either ask for it to be deferred while these matters are gone into and revisions are made, or alternatively to just vote against the recommendation and leave it at that. If the majority of members support the recommendation, it'll go ahead. But I personally just cannot sort of, in all conscience, vote for the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Friend.
Nothing at this moment, Chair.
So are you going to comment about whether we would whether we might raise no objection but asking them to give due regard to The traffic, the height, the green buffer, and the...
Yes, I agree with all that. I've got nothing to add.
All right, okay. Councillor Morgan, have you got any comments?
My comment is that, well, first and foremost, I do agree with Councillor Carey, and should this, and I say should this, be agreed tonight, anything further that we want to discuss, any issues are raised, be purely lip service and waste of time. So yeah. I think we've got to vote one way or the other. I know which way I'm going to vote.
Right. Councillor Mundry.
I agree with Councillor Carey. I think it should be deferred if we could.
But St Helens are going to meet on Friday of this week.
Just to clarify, Chair, that may not necessarily be the case.
Okay.
So our representations are due in by the 7th. They could make a decision any point after that. The indication that we had in July from St Helens was that it would be determined some point in August. The application will be going to DMC some point in August, but they haven't confirmed an exact date with us subsequent to that. So we don't have an exact date for the planning committee. The danger, of course, is that if we don't make a representation and we miss the we may in effect miss the opportunity. I'm wondering whether, and I'm just thinking out loud here, so if you could just bear with me a second, if we could have the opportunity to send, if members aren't happy and want to explore matters further, I think some direction on what needs to be looked at further that we haven't discussed tonight, I think would be useful. But from a procedural mechanism, whether we could possibly, whether the option exists to send a holding response with certain recommendations in, subject to further comments, but potentially that could undermine the position that DMC ultimately want to take.
Right, thank you. So, still continuing to get everyone's response on this. Councillor Parish, have you got any comments on whether we should give them a list of things to think about, or whether we should actually raise an objection?
I don't think we could raise an objection that would be easily sustainable with the Secretary of State. Maybe on some grounds, but on the bulk of it, probably not. But nevertheless, yeah, I'm torn between wanting to defer it, and I'm not quite sure what we get out of that, whether we get any sensible responses out of St Helens to our concerns. I suspect probably not, because they wouldn't want to prejudice their committee looking at it. So I'm not quite sure that would take us any further, really, though I appreciate we've probably not had early enough consultation and long enough to think about it. So I think I'm still with my suggestion of going with the recommendation, but adding our list of other things, which it may be our colleagues at St Helens will be grateful to hear anyway.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wheeler, have you got any comments? Councillor Wheeler, are you with us?
Sorry, I was, but I was muted. Thank you, Chair. I think I agree with Councillor Carey that in all conscience I would not feel happy voting to approve this application. A couple of questions. If we did refuse it, are we liable for costs at all? Does that apply in this case?
Very important comment. Can we have an answer to that from legal?
Well, if you're a party to the, well, it's passingly rare for a third party to be found liable for costs, but if we're a party to the to an inquiry, then potentially yes. I mean, what I would say to you, as I I always say to you, is that the possibility of costs is not a material consideration anyway. What's material is that you shouldn't do anything unreasonable.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Can I
say if you've got sound reasons for objecting, then that's fine. You know, so yeah, you obviously we wouldn't object on the basis of non-sound reasons, would we?
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
have
Can
some
I
other
just ask
points, Judith?
one more question? If we were minded to approve it then, with our comments, do those include the recommendations that the officers have put in section 10 onwards? Because I think some of those are very important, particularly to do with the travel plan and parking and public transport. Sorry, it's section 9, public transport. Would those go through automatically as comments to St Helens?
Yeah, it is section 10 on page 74. But
no, but if you look at section 9,
all right, sorry.
No, section 9 is the assessment.
Yes.
Sorry, have a look. Yes, sorry, it will be section 10. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, the section 10 is part of the. Yeah.
So they go through automatically.
Yes.
Yes, that's fine.
So we were talking about an additional.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
To add to it to give our particular concerns.
Okay.
Do you want to confirm that, Nikki? Am I correct?
That would be subject to your recommendations. I think the discussion that we've had so far would be that it would be that the recommendation that our representation will be submitted to St Helens, which details that we would have no objection subject to these points, and that we also request them to take into account certain additional points that members want to raise now in committee.
So that is not automatic that the points raised in section 10 would go through.
Well, that is the recommendation that officers have set out.
Yeah.
But if members wanted to put forward an alternative
or additional, which is what we're talking about, yes.
Amendments to, yeah, that's absolutely fine. That can be accommodated.
Yeah, but section 10 goes through, but we could make additional ones if we wanted to.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Chair, Councillor Parish, I wasn't quite sure whether what we were talking about was if we didn't accept the 10.1, the recommendations at 10.1, whether any of the agreed contributions, section 106 and others, might fall if we don't say we're happy with it. Because they presumably have they already been agreed with the developer?
Thank you, or Paul.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, can I come back on that? I mean, obviously the position is that we agree, or we consider that those things are necessary for this development to go ahead, and that would be whether we objected to the developments or not. If we objected to it on some ground, we would still presumably say, but if it does go ahead, it should go ahead with these. We would object to it. I mean, effectively, we are saying, what that's saying is that without these things, we would object to it. But as those things are being promoted and St Helens are, as I understand it, going to require them, then they won't found a reason for objection because we're going to ask for them to happen, and as I understand it, they are. St Helens are accepting of that, presumably.
Thank you. Councillor Wright, can I ask you if you've got anything to add? If we, reminder of what I'm asking about, if we do decide to raise no objection and we ask them to give due regard to our concerns, we've so far got down traffic, the height and the green buffer. Have you got any comment to make about that, or whether we should go that route at all? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, just the value of what we say. Like you said, got the 10 recommendations in section 10, and then we can add some others. Would they be given equal weight to the ones that are in, or would they be what we would offer to St Helens Council as an option? They would then consider them, or would they be as strong as these recommendations that we've got written in now? If you know what I mean.
Nikki or Paul?
So my recommendation there would be to add them into the recommendations in 10.1. So raise no objections to the proposed development subject to the following requirements, all bullet pointed as set out in 10.1, and then with further additional points also bullet pointed. So consideration given to the height of the building from vantage points within the Warrington boundary, to issues, local traffic issues, and the impact of the development on the green buffer. Now, to extent the green buffer does relate to a point that is already made there, which is determination of the application in accordance with the green belt policy. So we could maybe just add to that bullet point, because I think it's a green buffer rather than green wedge. So the policy interpretation could be slightly different, but openness on the green belt would still need to be considered in any case under the point that's listed. So if you were minded to proceed along that route, what we could do is agree the principles through DMC, and for that matter to be delegated to myself and Chair to agree, and we can agree some of that wording to be sent over to St Helens before the 7th.
Okay.
Would they have equal weight to what's already in there? That's what I'm saying. Or would they?
Yes, they would.
Yes, because it would just be part of it.
Yes.
Okay.
Any comments from Councillor Barr?
Yes, I mean, I agree with Councillor Parish and the proposal that you're not quite making, but we're discussing at the moment, which is that we raise no objections but put in additional comments. The only other additional comment, rather than simply the green belt or the green buffer, there was discussion of an environmental impact assessment, and certainly one of the objectors, former Councillor Gleave, raised the issue of damage to ancient woodland, potentially, or remnants of ancient woodland. So I'm just wondering whether that green buffer statement could be made slightly wider in terms of environmental impacts.
Councillor
Any
Parish,
comments, Nikki?
In terms of the impact on ancient woodland, it is very, very definitely within this application site within St Helens administrative boundaries, and therefore that should be taken into account in any case through their assessment. Notwithstanding that, we can draw their attention to that, but in any case they would need to take it into account.
It'd be helpful if we drew their attention to it, I think, simply because that's a comment that has come from our side, from the Warrington side.
Okay.
And ponds.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're at the stage where I ask, are there any additional comments or questions from councillors? Anybody want to make any further points? Are there any further points of clarification from officers?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right. So I think we've got quite a balance. We've got strong opinions on both sides, and a lot of people are very unsure, but I think, following from the discussion, I would like to propose the motion that the application, sorry, not the application, that we raise no objections subject to conditions and the S106, and with the additional requirements that considerations given to the list of things that we've mentioned, the traffic, especially when the motorways are held up, the height of that particular building in relation to what is seen from Warrington, and our comments on the green belt, the green buffer, and the ancient woodland, to be firmed up later by discussion with officers. So I will ask if I've got a seconder to that motion. Councillor Parish, are you prepared to second that?
Yeah, well, adding the rider was my idea, so I suppose to better second it. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you.
Can I add, Chair? I think the problem with deferring it is St Helens don't have to take any notice anyway, and even if we ask them questions, I'm not quite sure we get any more answers that would help us make a decision when it came back to us.
Okay, so Are there any amendments to the motion? Am I going to get an amendment this time, or are we just going to vote and see how it goes?
Chair, could I just add a comment, please?
Certainly.
I'm still not in favour of the proposal,
No.
but to vote against it would jeopardise some of the things that have been negotiated. What I really want to see is the proposal just go away, which
Yes.
if I go for the alternative and ask for a deferment, I don't think anything will change substantially. We'd just be tinkering around the edges. So I intend to abstain on this one. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so but has anyone any amendments to make? And then we'll okay, we'll go to the vote then. Jenny?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Barr?
For the recommendation.
Councillor Carey?
Abstain.
Councillor Friend?
For.
Councillor Grime?
For.
Councillor Morgan?
Abstain.
Councillor Mundry?
Abstain.
Councillor Parish?
For.
Councillor Wheeler?
Abstain.
Councillor Wright?
Councillor Wright, are you with us?
Abstain.
Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3. That's 4 votes in favour and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 abstentions.
Thank you very much. That must be a record number of abstentions, and perhaps we should take note, Nikki, about trying to negotiate quite a bit more time and wider presentations and advance notice of this sort of application.
Could we have a chair? May we have clarification from Paul Clisby as to what the effect of this vote is in terms of whether it was quorate or not? So, are 4 votes in favour sufficient for a response to be sent to St Helens or not?
That's a very good point.
Yes, yes, Chair. The committee has voted for the motion, 4-0 with 5 abstentions.
That's right. So the quorum just applies to how many of us are here at the meeting.
The abstentions have it.
4, isn't it?
The abstentions have it.
No, we need another 4, I'm afraid.
Okay, so we go on to.
I think the abstentions reflect that.
Sorry.
The abstentions reflect the concerns that we've got about how little time we've had to look at this and how
Yes.
it was
Yeah,
prepared.
that was the very comment that I made to Nikki, and we should try our best to negotiate more time in future.
Agree, Chair, it's one of those between a rock and a hard place decisions. That
I agree with that.
But also, I think that effectively major cross-border applications should be subject to public consultation on both sides of the border. Dealing with these two separately is silly, really, because the same people are affected by both.
Yes, thank you. Right, if we can go on to.
Chair, I know it's not very convenient at this stage in the agenda, but can I call for just a few minutes comfort break?
Certainly, and I think it's quite a good time, really. I will have a glass of water, and if we just take a minute or two out.
Thought you were going to say a glass of wine then.
Yeah. I'm going to get shut of a glass of water.
We've still got enough tricky applications to go. Not muted, by the way. Just give Les another moment to. So just waiting for the last councillor, I think.
I'm back, Chair.
Pardon?
I'm back.
Yes, but I don't think Les. Councillor Morgan, are you here? I don't think. Oh yes. Are you back, Councillor Morgan? We've got a message. Oh, it's not back yet. Thank you. Just give him a moment. Right.
The mod noise is off.
I think we're possibly going to have to carry on, at least with the first stages. Have you got any comments, Paul?
Well, Chair, obviously, as long as the meeting is quorate, it can continue without one member. And here he is.
Is he here?
He's back.
Oh, good.
Thank you for that, Chair. You've just made an old man very happy.
Right. Thank you very much. So we go on to item number 6, application 2020-36313, 149 Warrington Road, Pencath, Warrington. It's a proposed change of use from A1 shop to A5 hot food takeaway, including alterations to the rear elevation to enable extract ventilation and odour control. Can I invite the development manager to give us her.
Thank you, Chair. So the application, as you described there, proposes a change of use from a shop to a hot food takeaway. The process is described as being within a small retail parade located on Warrington Road in Pencath. The parade consists of 3 properties. One's a hairdresser's, one's a beautician's, and the site currently is a bridal shop. The front of the site is an area of hard standing, and beyond that, is a lay-by which extends the full width of all three properties. The area is primarily residential in nature, although there's a mixture of commercial and retail within relatively short distance along Warrington Road around the site. And the proposal, as we just said, involves the change of use of the existing building at ground floor from hot food takeaway to a hot food takeaway from a retail shop. Previously, it's been used as a bridal shop. Before that, it was used as an off licence. The application is before members today because it's been called in by a ward councillor, and the parish council as always. Parish council has also objected, and the details of these are contained within section 4 of your report. The application was notified. The application notified 32 neighbours, and a result 10 objections have been received. And again, these are summarised within your report for your information there. In terms of planning policy, you members will be aware that all applications must be made in accordance with the development plan unless other material considerations indicate otherwise. And the policies applicable to this development are set out within section 7 of your report. The key issues for assessment in this application are the principle of development, the impact on the character of the amenity, the impact on residential amenity and highways matters, and I'll look at each of these in turn. So in terms of the principle of development, the site is located on a major road linking Warrington with Liverpool in a highly sustainable location and major transport route. The site is within walking and cycling distance to a number of local facilities and, more importantly, its custom-based residential properties. Its application premises is currently vacant, and bringing this back into use would be of benefit to the local area and to the economy. And there doesn't seem to be any similar uses in the locality that would result in a cluster of such uses being apparent. The objections received in relation to the issues of obesity, health and proximity to schools are acknowledged, but the proposal would not lead to another concentration of similar uses, and it is of relatively small scale. Therefore, it's likely to have a significant detrimental impact. Therefore, in principle, the development accords with policy CS1 within the core strategy and is considered acceptable. Looking then towards visual amenity, I mean, the primary issue is associated with visual amenity is the flue itself. So there'll be no external changes to the shop unit, but the flue would be visible. It's on the side of the premises and would be visible from the highway, although it would be set back. In order, the majority of the flue would be to the rear. It would be piped around to the side, but the majority, for that reason, visual impact wouldn't be significant. But in any case, this would be mitigated by colour coding the flue, and there's a condition for that. So the flue will be colour coded in a colour to be submitted and agreed by officers through a further discharge conditions application. In terms of the impact on residential amenity, there are a few issues here to look at, and each of those need to be considered within the context of the existing use. So the bridal shop as such, no limitations on the opening hours of the bridal shop due to its nature would have been relatively conservative. The application site is proposing opening hours from 10 AM to 11 PM Monday to Saturday, and from 10 AM till 11:30 PM on Sundays and bank holidays. And to a certain extent, it would be considered that these would realistically align to similar type uses similar type retail uses. So, for example, the off licence that was previously on the site would be considered to have opening hours in approximately those time frames. In terms of the impacts on general comings and goings as a result of trade during those hours, it was considered that this proposal alone would not detrimentally increase in noise and disturbance to nearby residential occupiers, particularly as the site stands on a busy thoroughfare and any noise generated would be within the context of the existing background levels. So although there would be an element of noise created by this, people parking up, closing doors, etc., this is seen in the wider context of a very major through route through Pencath. In terms of the impact on odour, we just talked about there, a flue would be provided, and this would aid with the removal of smells and odours from the building and disperse them at a high level so as not to cause any loss of amenity surrounding neighbours. When we talk about high level there, that is above window openings. So if the neighbours, for example, were to have the windows open, it would mitigate against any potential impacts on that. Looking then towards highway matters, Warrington Borough Council and the transportation officers here have assessed the proposal and have commented that the proposed development is no more onerous than the existing in highways terms, and the existing situation and the situation in the past as retail use is material to this decision, and that's important to note. For these reasons then, as set out within the report, the proposal is considered to be acceptable, and it would not have any significant or detrimental impact on the visual amenity or residential amenity, and nor would it have any detrimental impact on highway safety, subject to the appropriate use of conditions, and for that reason it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nikki. I can confirm that we've received written representations from Mr. Ross and Mr. Hanley. Both of these are objections to the application. I will now ask members of the committee to confirm that they have read and understood these representations. Councillor Barr. Councillor Barr, are you with us?
Yes, confirm.
Thank you. Councillor Carey. Councillor Carey. Have we lost Councillor Carey? I'll come back to him. Councillor Friend.
Confirm.
Councillor Morgan. You're muted, Councillor Morgan. Still muted. Can you confirm you've read the...
Confirmed, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Mundry.
Confirm.
Thank you. Councillor Parish.
I thought we confirmed everything at the start of the meeting, Chair, but yes, I've confirmed.
No, at the start of the meeting you confirmed that you had the notes with you. Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, confirmed, Chair.
Councillor Wright. Councillor Wright.
Confirmed.
Right, and I also confirm that I've read and understood the representations. Councillor Carey isn't in the meeting at the moment. There must be something wrong there. So I think we'll continue this item without him because he's already missed the representation from the development manager. I confirm the representations will be included in the minutes of the meeting. I will now invite comments and questions from members to the officers in turn. Councillor Friend.
None at this time, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
What are you looking for, Chair?
Have you got any comments or questions to officers?
Yes, Chair. Comments. I think there's far too many food takeaways in this area. Sympathise with the residents.
Okay, right. Thank you. Councillor Carey, are you back in the meeting?
Yes, Chair. The system kicked me out and I had to reboot, so I'm back now.
All right. Sorry. Can I ask? Did you hear the development manager's report or the?
No, I heard none of it. Sorry. So I'll sit this one out.
Okay, thank you very much. That's probably for the best. Thank you. Councillor Mundry, have you got any comments or questions?
No comments, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Parish.
Yes, Chair. One of the objectors was making reference to our own policies as well as the MPPF. So I think we need a bit more further guidance on whether there is issue of preponderance of takeaways in a particular area and how that might impact on this particular application.
Okay, can you answer that, Nikki?
So I think that within the representation that was being made directly to DMC ahead of committee, there was reference made to the hot food takeaways, and there was a few points pulled out of there, wasn't there? And I think in terms of the number of hot food takeaways within the vicinity, what the SPD does is look at that more on a local centre or town centre basis, rather than these kind of small parades that we would normally have, that we see in this instance, which aren't actually identified at all within the SPD. But that doesn't mean to say that they're not acceptable because they're not identified within the SPD. What the SPD serves to do with that regard is to maintain the viability and vitality of those centres. So, but I think there are other points within that representation that we've received, and I think one of them is about proximity of hot food takeaways to residential, and they shouldn't be adjacent to residential. But the SPD does go on to say there that it's to do with the, for want of a better word, seepage of odours through party walls into other properties, and this again doesn't apply in this instance because there is no party wall to another property. The properties immediately adjacent are also in commercial use.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Nikki, for that. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Just about, I think, yes.
All right, can we go on to Councillor Wheeler then? Have you got any questions or comments?
No, Chair, I'm struggling a bit with this one because I don't like empty shops. I think the impression on the local area is not a good one, and they can stand empty for years. I'm trying to think what's the difference between granting permission to this and the presence of an off licence which was there previously in terms of parking. I think, and I come back to, I think is the odours, and I think despite the best filtration systems, you would always get odours from food premises. So still struggling with this one, Chair. Okay, thank you. Councillor Wright, have you got any comments or questions?
Yeah, I think I've got concern about the proximity and the odours, and I do know from experience that it's very difficult to stop that presence and that smell you get from these places. So I've got concerns about this for that. I'm just reading the letter from the gentleman. I think the thing about making healthier choices. We've heard a lot about that this week, and I don't know if it's a material consideration, but seem to be a lot of these fast food outlets.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wright. Thank you, Councillor Wright. I picked that up as well. A lot of the objections were about health, and considering that, could you expand a bit, Nikki, on, is this a planning issue, but whether we should be encouraging a takeaway or giving permission for a takeaway that is not perhaps encouraging the healthiest of eating, especially as it's not actually an application from a person who wants to take over as a takeaway. I understand it's a speculative application, isn't that correct? Nikki, can you tell us?
I can't advise whether it's a speculative application, I'm afraid, Chair. I don't have that information, but in any case, I think that if it was to be the case, that would likely to be to the marketability of the premises, and potential links there to what Councillor Wheeler has said about the potential for this unit to stay open as a retail use. In terms of the links to obesity and healthy lifestyles, we don't have a policy within Warrington to minimise the number of hot food takeaways within a specific area on that basis. I think you would have to look at this across the board. What we have done within the report is talk about it in a rounded sense and look at whether there will be a clustering effect of takeaways that would likely have those kind of implications in terms of potential obesities, etc. But fundamentally, we don't have a policy to support that.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yes?
Can I just make a comment on that?
Yes. You've just muted, actually.
Sorry.
Right.
In Stockton Heath, there's a fish and chip shop. On a Friday night, there are queues outside it. For some people, that's the Friday night treat. So while I fully go along with, you know, comments on obesity and hot food takeaways not being particularly healthy, there is a difference between that and your Friday night treat of fish and chips or a pizza takeaway. So I think we need to be a little bit careful about the comments on all hot food takeaways are bad, because for a lot of people they are, you know, a one-off, once a week treat.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments from Councillor Barr?
Right.
Councillor Barr, are you with us?
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you now,
Right,
yes.
okay. Hey, so sorry about that. This is almost a generic application, and every time the hot food takeaway application comes in, we get all the same reasons why it should go ahead from the officers, and quite rightly so. The officers are doing their job professionally and correctly and trying to identify actual harm, and all exactly the same objections from residents, and quite often, if they pick them up, their councillors. So it's very difficult to make a balanced individual assessment of an application like this one. The two questions I have, given that we don't have a policy on avoiding the clustering of hot food takeaways, is the actual figures on how many takeaways there are within what sort of distance won't be relevant, because they can't affect our decision. But I would certainly find it helpful if we did have such a policy and we had some sort of indicative numbers of what's an acceptable number. And the other one is, I thought there were regulations as to distance from schools. And the objectors again here are raising proximity to schools, and the officers saying no, we're not sufficiently close to schools for it to be an issue in our decision. So I find these decisions really difficult to take, because it's the public up against the regulations, but it's also the vociferous members of the public, not those who want a Friday night treat or an occasional treat, or who will consume fast food as part of a well-controlled diet, as Councillor Wheeler points out. So I find these applications very, very difficult. But from the officers, as proximity of schools and other takeaways, what information do we have, and should we be taking that into account?
Nikki, can you answer that question?
Yes, in terms of proximity to schools, there is there's no hard and fast rule regarding that. And I think even if there was, that in itself, I think we would have to look, in the absence of a policy, would have to look at what the implications of that would be, about how the school operates, how the hot food takeaway was going to operate. Just because it would be located near a school, if the school children wouldn't be allowed out, for example, at lunchtime, well, the impacts of that then might be limited. But at the moment, as I say, we just don't have a policy for that, and there isn't a national policy.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Nikki. We'll go around again. Some points have been raised. We'll see if anyone's got anything else further to say. Councillor Friend, have you got any further comments or questions?
Not at this time, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Morgan?
No, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Mundry?
No comments, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Parish?
Not at this time, Chair.
Councillor Wheeler?
No further comments, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Wright?
Yeah, parking. I know one of the residents has raised issues of parking, obstructing the visibility or causing an obstruction. Planning permission will only be granted if adequate and appropriate mitigation measures can be secured. As is the parking, I know we said there was an off licence there before. If that wasn't good, if that was causing problems, then we shouldn't just say, well, there was one there before, we're not going to do anything about the parking. So I'll ask the officer on parking, does he feel that it is okay, the parking situation.
Mike, can you answer that, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, sure. I mean, it is addressed in your report, the highway issues on paragraphs 932 through to 941, but the comments from residents are appreciated and understood in respect to hot food takeaways and potential parking issues. But what we would look at is our own parking standards and the requirements. And notwithstanding this was a bridal shop, as Nikki talked about earlier, it's an A1 use. Now that A1 use covers an awful lot of different units. It could be a post office, a retail unit, an off license. The parking standards for A1 use are more strict than parking standards for hot food takeaways. So, for example, if this is a hot food takeaway, it should require 3 spaces. If it's an existing A1 use, it should require 6 spaces. So, technically, there's less demand for parking, if that makes sense. So we would never be able to fight a refusal on those grounds.
Okay, thank you. But there's only 2 to 3 spaces, aren't there?
That's right, Chair. You know, I mean, but that's what we're saying is,
yes,
the actual proposed use has a less of a requirement for parking provision than the existing use.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barr, have you any further comments or questions?
No further comments, Chair.
Okay. Anything else from any councillor? Any further comment to make? Do any officers want to make any further points of clarification?
I just wanted to raise one thing, please, Councillor Grime. That was in relation to Councillor Wright's previous comments, and not the parking one, that one previous time, and that was on the basis of the smells generated from the site. And I just thought it'd be useful just to draw attention to condition 3, which is in the report there, and it talks about the details of cooking equipment, and associated air extraction and filtration system, which will need to be submitted to us, and that will control all odour. It'll need to be implemented prior to the opening of the premises, and it shall be, and it specifies in the condition, it shall be used at all times when cooking activities are occurring. So just provide some comfort there for Councillor Wright. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just a comment, I had read that and I see that, and I do read that a lot of times, but in the real world, even with all the best intentions, I live just down the way from a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I get the KFC, they call it, and I can smell the odours from that. So they've probably got the best filtration systems and all that, but you still get it. So that's my worry. Thank
you, Councillor Wright.
Chair, sorry, yes. Can I just
certainly
mention? I understand that schools are mentioned in the SPD in relation to hot takeaways. I think there's an SPD policy in relation to secondary schools within 400 metres. My understanding is that wouldn't be applicable here, but there is some provision in relation to SPD.
Right, thank you for that. I can remember us discussing takeaways in relation to schools before, but I think they were very close. Do any other councillors wish to comment again further? Any further clarifications from officers?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. So I think following from what we've said, I propose the motion that the application is approved subject to the conditions. Councillor Mundry, would you be prepared to second that?
I'll second that.
Sorry, did you say you will?
Yes, I will second it, yes.
Right, so Councillor Mundry has seconded that. Does anyone want to make an amendment to the motion? Okay, can I pass over to the Democratic Services Officer to take the vote?
Chair, sorry, can I just interrupt?
Certainly.
Yeah, sorry. So in relation to the SPD policy, I understand what it does is it imposes an additional condition about opening hours. My understanding is it relates to secondary schools within 400 metres. Perhaps you could, and I'm assuming it because it's not mentioned in the report, then it's not relevant. But you may want to just add that delegate to your officers to deal with the SPD as part of the decision. So that you would move whatever you're going to move, but then just add that officers should be delegated with the power to deal with any effects that would the SPD would require in relation to this application. I don't think I put that very well, have I? But I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I'm saying that insofar as there is a requirement for a condition required by the SPD,
Sorry.
If that is the case, then your officers will be delegated to do that.
Yeah.
I think I need someone to propose that as an amendment. Is someone prepared to do that?
Yeah, I'm prepared to propose that as an amendment. I'm looking at Google Maps at the moment, and there are 2 primary schools, but they're well beyond the 400 metres, I think. Yeah. And Pencath High School is 2 or 3 times that distance. I can't see proximity of schools being a factor here.
No, I'm sure your officers would have raised it if it had been relevant. Yeah.
Yes, I agree, but it's worth including. So I'm prepared to accept that amendment. So we go to the vote now. I understand. Can the Democratic Services Officer take the vote that we approve subject to conditions, and we request the development. Is it Nikki? We're requesting the development manager to take care of any considerations with regard to the policy on schools. Okay, can you take the vote on that, Jenny?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Barr.
For.
Councillor Friend.
For.
Councillor Grime.
For.
Councillor Morgan.
Refuse.
Councillor Mundry.
For.
Councillor Parish.
I'm against.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
And Councillor Wright.
Against.
Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes in favour and 3 votes against, so the application is approved.
Thank you. So we're on to item 7. Can I just check, is Councillor Carey with us now?
Yes, Chair.
Oh, good. Right. Application number 2020-36836. That's Swiss Cottage, Canal Side, Grappenall on Fell Wall. It's a householder application for the demolition of a detached garage and the construction of a 2-storey side extension, part single and part double-storey rear extension. The application is recommended for refusal. Can I invite the development manager to present a report?
Thank you, Chair. The application site comprises a detached mid-19th century cottage within a large plot next to Bridgewater Canal. The immediately surrounding area is rural in character, and the site is located within the Greenbelt and the Grappenall Village Conservation Area. The application seeks permission for a part single, part 2-storey extension to the side and rear of the property, and would mostly replace an existing outrigger. It will be rendered and have a slate roof to match the materials of the main house, and the before dormer is added to the roof at first floor level, 1 to the eastern side elevation, 2 on the western side and 1 to the rear side projection. There's also a balcony to propose to the rear, and at ground floor, the single-storey element would have a flat roof. It's relatively unusual, actually, that we bring an application of this type to DMC, and this because it's a refusal. Ordinarily, such applications would be determined under delegated powers, but in this case, it is before members because of a calling request that we've received from Councillor Biggin, who is supportive of the application in terms of its cohesive design and appearance. There's been no objections from the parish council or from local residents, but we have received an objection from Warrington's conservation officer, on the grounds that the proposed extension would have a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the original dwelling, and by extension, the character and appearance of the conservation area. As members are aware, all applications should be determined in accordance with local plan policy, unless other material considerations indicate otherwise, and the relevant policies are contained within section 6 of your report for information. In terms of the key issues to be assessed as part of that, as part of the application, they're to do with the principle of development, notably development within the green belt, the design and the impacts of the application on local character, specifically the conservation area and residential amenity, as well as highways. So just to look at the principle of development, first of all, in terms of the green belt. So the MPPF states that an exception to inappropriate development in the green belt includes the extension or alteration of a building, provided that it does not result in a disproportionate addition over and above the size of the original building. As a guideline, Warrington's Householder SPD defines a disproportionate addition as being an increase in floor space of more than a third, both previous use and proposed extensions, to the original dwelling. It's material that a previous application for a very similar development was refused on the grounds that it has been constituted inappropriate development within the green belt. The decision was appealed and dismissed on the 20th of March 2019. However, there has been some changes in the application since then, and this application sees the reduction in the footprint of the development by only 3 metres squared, but the submission of additional information in relation to the original dwelling has been submitted. On this basis, the proposed extension would amount to an additional floor space of around 27% of the original dwelling, and therefore would fall within tolerance levels stated within the SPD. However, the prominence of the proposed development in relation to the original dwelling and buildings on site must also be considered in terms of the impact on the impact of the green belt. The existing outrigger and the garage, as well as the outbuildings which once stood in the garage location, are visually subservient to the main house. The proposals would significantly increase the overall prominence of the property within the green belt. The development would still, for this reason, the development would appear highly prominent in comparison with the original dwelling house and single-storey outbuildings, and for this reason, the principle of development in the green belt, in this particular instance, is not acceptable. In terms then of the impact on the conservation area, as we just stated, the application is located within the Grafnall Village Conservation Area, and as such, the impacts on the heritage asset must be assessed. Although the previous application was refused by the local planning authority due to its impact on the openness of the green belt only, the inspectorate also refused the application at appeal, as it would not preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the conservation area. The inspector's previous decision is material in considering the current proposal, given the similarities between this and the previous scheme, and this assessment is echoed in the comments of the conservation officer, who has recommended the application be refused. The harm to the heritage assets has been assessed as less than substantial, as detailed within paragraph 8.7 of your report. According to the MPPF, where a development will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of designated heritage assets, this harm should be weighed against the public benefit of the proposal. There is no known public benefits of the proposal which would outweigh the harms to the conservation area, and none have been put forward by the applicant. The application is recommended for refusal on this basis. In terms of residential amenity and highway safety, it's considered that there are no significant impacts that we would like to raise. And for those reasons set out, therefore, the conclusions are that the application would be harmful to the green belt and would be harmful to the character of the conservation area, and is therefore recommended for refusal for the reasons set out within paragraphs 9.2 and 9.3 of your report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nikki. I can confirm that we've received a written representation from Mr. Woodward of JT Design Consultant in support of the application. I'll now ask members of the committee to confirm that they have read and understood this representation. Councillor Barr?
Confirm.
Councillor Carey?
Confirm.
Councillor Friend.
Confirm.
Councillor Morgan.
Confirm.
Councillor Mundry.
Confirm.
Councillor Parish.
Confirm.
Councillor Wheeler.
Confirm, but Chair, can I say we also had a representation from the applicant which wasn't sent through development control, and I know I emailed Nikki about that today. I've not managed to speak to Nikki about it, so the officers may not be aware of that that video that we got sent.
Nikki, can you comment on that, or perhaps Jenny?
I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I believe that Jenny has spoken to the applicant. Jenny, can you comment?
I'd confirmed. I'd spoken with the chair about the video link, and neither the chair or myself would actually access the video. I don't think it's supported by our systems. I did go back to the applicant to advise them of this, but I didn't receive a response before the start of the committee, so I'm not sure what the video contains.
Chair, can I just come back on that? I mean, I only looked at it last night, but it's in addition to what Mr. Woodward sent through. There is that that was sent through to all members of DMC. So I think that, I mean, does that need to be noted?
I don't see why we shouldn't note it.
Yeah.
Does Paul wish to make any comments?
But it's whether all members viewed that video, you see, Chair.
Yeah, well, obviously we didn't all view it because some of us couldn't access it. But,
I couldn't access it either, Chair, so I've not seen it.
I could quite easily. I don't know why, but I could.
Right.
I was not able to access it as well. Well, Chair.
Thank you. I think quite a lot of us have not been able to access it.
I haven't seen it, Chair.
Right. Paul Clisby, is he present?
Yep.
Did he have to leave the meeting at some point? We don't seem to have any advice from Paul. What do you think, Nikki? Do you think we should just comment that a video was sent, but unfortunately most of us couldn't access it?
Yeah, I'm the category also that couldn't access the video, but reading the content of the email that was submitted with the video, it was a video of the surroundings. So I think it was the applicant's attempt to be helpful in assisting the members in the absence of a site visit. Yeah. But I think based on the information that is presented within the report, based on the information that has been made available to you, including Google Maps and the photographs that you've been provided with, I think it's a similar level of information there, and that we could progress on that basis. That would be my advice. So we could note that it would be received, but I think everybody's had access to a similar level of information.
Okay, thank you. Just while I'm speaking to you, Nikki, we've still got item 6 up on the screen.
Apologies, Chair. Oh, there we go.
Right, Paul is back now. Paul, did you happen to hear what we've just been talking about that we wanted your advice on? Paul Clisby. Or perhaps we'll come back to him later. And in the meantime, can I just go on to Councillor Wright? Can you confirm that you've read and understood the representations?
Confirm.
Okay, and I've read and understood them as well. And the representation will be included in the minutes of the meeting. Have we got Paul Clisby now? Are you with us, Paul? I understand he's in the meeting, but seems to have difficulty making contact. Well, we'll carry on in the meantime. I'll invite comments and questions from members to the officers, starting with Councillor Morgan. Have you got any questions for officers or comments you wish to make?
Nothing at this moment, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mundry.
No questions or comments, Chair.
Councillor Parish.
Not at this stage, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler, have you got any comments or questions for officers?
No, Chair. In theory, I should be agreeing with the refusal for this application, given the it is contrary to our policy, and the conservation officer has raised comments. On the other hand, I think the design looks good. I think the design looks in keeping with the present house and the surrounding area. So I'm not sure at this stage, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wright, have you got any comments or questions?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Councillor Barr.
Yes. To what extent is the proposal subsidiary to the main property? To what extent is it too big? Nikki, can you answer?
So it's 27% greater in size than the original dwelling. So it meets with our policies in that regard. So it's not I've got the expression there. So it's not disproportionate to the scale of the original dwelling. But the issue then comes in terms of its massing and the impact that would have on the green belt and the openness of preserving the green belt.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Carey, have you got any comments or questions?
Yes, Chair. Seems everybody's sitting on the fence. I'll take issue with the Conservation Officer's assessment of this. I think that this is quite a reasonable proposal. It's not a particularly sort of historic house in terms of its appearance. It seems to be fairly run-of-the-mill. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but there's nothing about it that, to me, requires this level of preservation. And if the householder wants to increase the facilities in their home by having what we would normally consider an acceptable level of extension, I don't see the harm in that. I don't think it detracts from the conservation area or from the green belt. It's in an existing residential plot, and I'm quite happy with it, really.
Thank you. Councillor Friend, have you got any comments or questions?
I would just echo exactly what Councillor Carey's just said. I had a look on Google Earth and had a look at it. There's a great many trees all around there, and I can't see actually whether anybody else would see it. It's hidden away there. But I have no questions for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Have we got Paul Clisby back now? No. Do any other councillors wish to make any further comments?
Yes, Chair, Councillor Parish. I'm not totally persuaded by this idea that just it's out of sight. People can do what they like. It is the green belt, and people buy their houses knowing they're in the green belt, and just because it's out of sight, out of mind, I'm not sure it by itself is sufficient. I'm actually going to disagree, and I think the designs as they're presented leaves us with. I'm not too fussed about the view from canal side and from the canal itself, but at the rear of the property, the bit that can't be seen, it does frankly look like a bit of a hodgepodge. Different style windows in the rear elevation, and a balcony on a flat roof over the kitchen, over the kitchen. So and yeah, the different styles and things. I'm really not quite sure how much you can actually, in those technical terms, read the original building. I'm not quite sure how much was original to this. I presume it's originally a T shape, and so I'm I'm not totally persuaded by, the fact that it's out of sight, out of mind. I'm not quite sure the difference from the previous application, whether with the addition of the outbuildings, just how much bigger it is than what was there in 1948. But the fact that it can't be seen by anybody, it's still greenbelt. All you'd have to do then in the greenbelt was let lots of trees grow around your property, and you'd be able to change it.
Yeah, I think the difference from the previous application is that it's 27% bigger than the original property. Nikki, can we ask, is the original property just the small cottage with the 2 rooms that with a narrow hall between that face canal side, or did it have, even in 1948, the long T-shaped extension on the back?
So detailed information has been provided, which evidences what can be classed as the original property in this regard, and because the level of detail that's involved, I wouldn't want to say too much here that would be contrary to what those details say. So unfortunately, I can't give you that information at the moment. What I would say, sorry. So what I would say is that the assessment has been done. So the applicant, as part of this application, has provided additional information about what can be considered the part of the original application. Now, what you just said though would make sense, because part of what constitutes the original also included outbuildings as well, and that has been taken into account when we're looking at the floor space of this.
Thank you. Yes.
If I may, I must say I'm with Peter Carey on this one, and not with Steve Parish. I'm all for defending principles, and Steve is quite right that there is a greenbelt principle, but I think there comes a point at which we're defending a principle against any notion of common sense. This is not a beautiful building. It's already been messed up. If the owners want to mess it up a little bit more, I can't get very upset about it. It's surrounded by sheds and farm buildings, so it's not in a residential setting, and I cannot see the harm of their proposal because I can't see where you're going to see it from. So whilst normally I would die in a ditch for the greenbelt, I can't find myself willing to die in a ditch to protect the bit of greenbelt that is adjacent to this property. Now, I don't want to discourage our officers from refusing such applications. I think they should refuse such applications, but I think this is a refusal too far.
Thank you. Councillor Barr, you're definitely not required to die in a ditch.
Thank you.
Just vote. Any further points from councillors? Any points of clarification from officers?
Yeah, I've just got a couple of points there to raise, if you don't mind, Chair. One of them is to do with Greenbelt policy, and obviously, as we've already stated and it is set out in the report, these are national requirements in terms of Greenbelt policy, and we've assessed the officers consider we've assessed the application appropriately against those policies. The other element just to draw upon is the impact of the extensions on the conservation area, and as I stated earlier, this isn't something that we raised as officers in the previous refusal of the application that was done. I don't think we had a conservation officer at that time. So the previous application was refused on greenbelt grounds, and that application, that appeal was upheld, and the appeal was dismissed. But there are similarities in the character of this application and the previous application, which went to appeal, and they are very similar in nature. When the inspector was making their previous decision on that application, they also took into account the impact on the conservation area and found that it was harmful. and that was material in making their decision, that they found that it would have an adverse impact on the conservation area. And when we look at the conservation area, we look at what, you know, we can't look at buildings in isolation, because the character is defined by a number of buildings that are within that, and the boundary of the conservation area has been purposefully drawn at some point to incorporate this building, and therefore there must be a recognition that this does contribute to the character of the conservation area. And I just point out also, within section 8.8 of the report, that the heritage asset is being assessed as less than substantial harm, and that's a technical term that's referred to in the NPPF as well. So it's harmful, but it's less than substantial, still harmful. But the only way that could be mitigated once that's been identified should be through identifying public benefits. And in this instance, there are no public benefits associated with this scheme that either we can identify as officers or that the applicant has put forward.
Aren't we obliged in some way to identify harm?
So there is harm, yes. So within paragraph 8.7 of the report, that's where the harm is identified, albeit less than substantial.
But presumably we can judge whether we agree that that is harm or not.
Exactly. You can make the judgment of whether you consider there would be whether this development is harmful to the conservation area.
Thank you. Okay. So is that it? Any further comments from councillors?
I'd add, I'm looking at it on Google Maps at the moment, and there is no characteristic building that characterises the conservation area within shouting distance of this site. It's next to a farm with very large sheds. Across the canal is a modern development, a house with a swimming pool, which again doesn't do anything for the conservation area. And the actual conservation area, or building characteristic of the conservation area, start a long way up canal side, like beyond trees and well beyond the site. Physically, this building is like an outbuilding from the farm development right next to it. It's tucked away in a very, very small corner. So I, in my heart of hearts, cannot see harm, even if it's in the report as a limited amount of harm. But there I'm exercising my judgment. I'm not criticising the officers. The officers have done what we want them to do.
Thank you. I think then that we're ready to move to a vote. Councillor Barr, would you like to make a proposal?
I move approval of the application as it stands.
Could I second that, Chair?
Sorry?
Could I second that?
Who said that? Sorry.
Councillor Carey.
Oh, I was just about to ask you. So the motion is proposed and seconded.
Councillor, could I interject here?
Certainly.
Please? Thank you. Just if we are going to make a recommendation, which is an approval, we would need a reason for that. So it needs to be a specified reason. So I mean, we've got two reasons for approval proposed there. So the common sense would maybe suggest that your reasons for refusal would be reflective of those reasons. So reasons for approval would be reflective of those reasons, the contrary to of refusal.
Well, can I suggest one, that the test of harm either to the conservation area or to the green belt has not been passed?
I dispute that, because harm is by definition. If it's in the green belt, it's automatically harm, basically.
We disagree on that, Councillor Parish.
I'm going off the NPPF, I think.
But it's only a 27% increase, which is within our guidelines in the green belt. So it's a matter of whether the garage sitting next to a very ordinary plain garage sitting next to the house is how that compares with the fairly neat extension added onto the house. So I think you could argue it anyway. What would you say, Nikki?
So in terms of the NPPF, then you'll be looking at whether you consider that the proposed development adversely impacts the openness of the green belt in this location.
No.
So whether there's any adverse impact on the green.
Right.
In my view, there isn't.
Okay, well, I think we've got a proposal that's seconded. Does anyone want to make an amendment before we go to the vote? Having taken on board Councillor Parish's comment. Any amendment?
Nikki, if that reason is sufficient, that we disagree that it doesn't affect the openness of the green belt, is that a sufficient reason?
That's your view. If that's your view, taking into account planning policy.
And it also does not harm the conservation area, is the second reason.
Yep, so have you got those down?
Yeah, Councillor Carey again. Before we move to the vote, are there any conditions the officers would want to place on the applicant before we go to the vote, assuming it gets approved?
Nikki, do you want to specify some now, or do you want to just add the usual conditions later if
I don't believe...
perhaps could remove permitted development rights?
Chair, can I sorry, it's Paul Frisby here.
Yes, oh welcome, Paul.
Sorry, Chair, I've been having some difficulties. Only to say, if I am here, if you do have any, if I've missed any questions while I was absent.
Right. Yes, there was a question to you because the applicant sent in a video which most of us have not been able to access, and I was going to ask you if that would have any effect. But as the proposal that's on the table at the moment is to accept the application, I don't think you need to answer that before we go to the vote.
Does need an answer about what if there are conditions to be applied, how would they get applied if the vote is passed?
Nikki, can you answer that?
If you were minded to approve the application, there are two ways we can do it. You could either defer for a further report, we'd either have an implications report, or we could have a report which details the conditions, or alternatively, to make the resolution tonight, you could delegate those conditions to myself. We can have a look at those, noting what you said there about removing PD rights.
I'm happy to delegate them, but I'd like advice as to whether it would be prudent of us to remove permitted development rights for any further development.
Can you advise on that, Nikki?
In removing PD rights, you do limit the opportunities in future for this to further impact on the green belt and the conservation area. Yeah.
Can I just ask whether that would include not being able to stick in an outbuilding in the garden? Because I don't know what's, they don't have cars in the garage, so I don't know what's going to be coming out of the garage in terms of storage with nowhere to go.
All elements, yes.
Nikki, can you answer?
Yes, that could include all elements, yes.
Does anyone want to make any further comments before we go to the vote? I think it's time we voted on this. So we've got a motion for approval, and that's seconded. And can I amend that we delegate conditions to Nikki and remove permitted development rights? Is that acceptable, Councillor Barr? You're muted.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Can we go to the vote then, Jenny?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barr.
For approval.
Councillor Carey.
For approval.
Councillor Friend.
For.
Councillor Grime.
Abstain.
Councillor Morgan.
Approve.
Councillor Mundry.
For.
Councillor Parish.
Against approval.
Councillor Wheeler.
Abstain.
And Councillor Wright.
For.
2, 3. That's 6 votes in favour of approval.
Thank you. Right, item 8. Application number 2020-36851, land between the Hawthorns, Pool Lane and 33 Chester Road, Walton. A proposed detached dwelling, and that's a resubmission of a previous application as you've got in front of you. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. Can I ask the development manager to present a report?
Thank you, Chair. So the application site is an area of grassland on the northwest side of Pool Lane, lying south of the Hawthorns and north of 33 Chester Road, which is a residential property, Grade 2 listed building, which is also known as Pool Cottage. There is an existing hedgerow along the southern boundary of the site and a number of trees along the northwestern boundary. The proposal seeks planning permission for the construction of a detached dwelling on the land, and due to the changes in levels across the site, the dwelling will be built into the slope of the land, allowing the two-storey rear projection to appear as a single-storey projection. And it will be in a relatively traditional design to respect its setting. Excuse me. The application is before members due to no objection by Walton Parish Council on the basis of overdevelopment and it being too large for its plot. The application was publicised by 16 neighbour notification letters, and as a result, four objections have been received from local residents, and these are summarised within section 4 of your report. But briefly, residential amenity, visual amenity, heritage, ecology, highways and flood risk. As members are aware, all applications need to be determined in accordance with development plan policies unless other material considerations indicate otherwise, and these relevant policies are contained within section 7 of your report. The key issues for consideration are the principle of the development and its location, its visual amenity, the impact on the heritage asset, which is the nearby Grade 2 listed building, residential amenity and highway safety. So looking at these then, the surrounding area is residential in nature, and therefore the application respects the principles of uses established within the vicinity. Members will be aware, as discussed in detail earlier, that the council can only demonstrate a 3.7 a year supply of deliverable housing land, and therefore we do not currently have a 5-year housing land provision as required by the NPPF. The lack of 5-year housing land supply is a material consideration in the determination of the application to which significant weight should be attached. The proposed development constitutes a small-scale infill plot within the settlement of Lower Walton. It is therefore considered to be development in a sustainable location and acceptable therefore under the provisions of the NPPF. In terms of visual amenity, the building would respect the setting in terms of its siting, design, materials and form. And the development site would be noticeable from the public domain, particularly from the junction of Walton New Road, and has been designed to take this into account. Nevertheless, the proposal development would be of an appropriate scale and would transition between number 33 Chester Road, as a listed building, to the larger scale developments at Hawthorns. So therefore it takes into account the surrounding character and nature of the areas which it is situated in. Therefore, having regard to the appropriate policies, is considered to be acceptable. Looking now, therefore, in terms of the impacts on the heritage assets, the application has been assessed by the Council's Conservation Officer, and it's acknowledged that the setting of the Grade 2 listed Pool Cottage has changed over time. Its rural setting has become more urbanised. Whilst to some extent the introduction of a new dwelling on the application site would result in further urbanisation of the area, the visual impacts of the development on the setting of the listed building is mitigated by the 3 points which are within paragraph 9.25 of your report, and specifically these are the location of the building within its plot, so placing the new building behind the side building line and to the rear of the listed building, the lowering of the ground levels within the site, so that the floor levels, so the lowering of the floor levels within the site, so that the ground level of the new property is the same as that of the adjacent listed building. The ridge height of the proposed building, which is, although it was 63 centimetres higher than that of the listed building, would be 3 metres lower than that of the Hawthorns, its other neighbour. It's considered that the pro scheme would not be visually harmful to the setting of the listed building in terms of its scale and massing and location within its plot, and it would not adversely impact on views of and from the asset, which play an important part in the way that the asset is experienced. In terms of residential amenity, the application proposes suitable interface distances in accordance with policy and would not significantly adversely impact on the neighbouring properties. And in terms of highway safety, there are no recognised issues associated with this. For these reasons, and set out within your report, the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nikki. I can confirm that we've received written representations from Mr. Booth, which is an objection, and Mr. Woodward, JT Design Consultancy, in support of the application. These were the representations that arrived in time, but with some other applications this evening, there were other representations which arrived late, which some of us may have had the opportunity to read, but others not. So we can't make them a condition of taking part in the application. So I'll ask members of the committee to confirm that they have read and understood these two representations. Councillor Barr?
Confirm.
Councillor Carey?
Confirm.
Councillor Friend?
Confirm.
Councillor Morgan?
Confirm.
Councillor Mundry?
Confirm.
Councillor Parish?
Confirm.
Councillor Wheeler?
Confirm.
Councillor Wright?
Confirm.
And I have also read and understood the representations. I confirm these representations will be included in the minutes of this meeting. I'll now invite comments and questions from members to the officers in turn. Councillor Mundry, have you got any questions for officers or any comments on the application?
No comments or questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Parish?
Not really, Chair. The main issue seems to be traffic, but the amount of traffic which will be generated from one house, it's obviously a bit hazardous on the corner, but I don't think it makes a substantial difference.
Councillor Wright, have you got any comments or questions?
Yeah, I think the speed limit was dropped to 30 miles an hour on that part of the road there because of the car showrooms that was opened around the corner. It should be 40 up to there. No.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barr?
No, the only issue is the highways issue, and I would like a comment from Mike, because most of the representations have stressed the difficulty of egress from Pool Lane and the danger of the exit onto Chester Road, and also visibility onto Pool Lane. So there's some question of visibility displays, but then they always do. So I would welcome advice from Highways Officer.
Yes, please, Mike, can you comment on that? There certainly seemed a strong difference in tone between the representations and objections and the officer's report.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify, I mean, obviously the highways issues are dealt with in your report. There are three issues we've looked at when we've considered this site. One is whether the site would have an impact on Pool Lane itself, and it's considered that it doesn't. It provides more than adequate parking plus a turning space within the plot, so there shouldn't be an impact in terms of any overflow parking on Pool Lane. The second issue is it provides appropriate visibility for the access point onto Pool Lane. So the final point is the key point really, and it's the access point onto Chester Road. Now anyone who knows that road knows how busy it is, how complicated the junction arrangements are, and there's no denying that the visibility to the left is poor, but it does meet current required standards. And the overall issue is whether one additional vehicle emerging, or one additional dwelling, creating traffic in and out of that access point, it causes a severe impact. Now, given the fact that there is now a turn and head down a Pool Lane and a new residential properties that are already serviced by refuse vehicle service deliveries, etc., it's not considered that one additional dwelling will cause a safety hazard. So we've not raised an objection.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Councillor Carey, have you any comments or
No
questions?
Comments,
thank you, Councillor Friend.
No comments, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Morgan.
No comments, Chair.
Right, thank you. Are there any further comments or questions from councillors?
Chair?
Yes?
I think you forgot me.
I'm terribly sorry, Councillor Wheeler.
On a second, dozed off. No, my comments were going to be on the highway access, particularly onto Chester Road, because as Mike said, it is an absolute nightmare trying to cross, turn, whatever on that bend. And, you know, it's a case of let the buyer beware, whoever buys that property. But as Mike said, you know, one extra dwelling would not have a significant, possibly will not have a significant impact.
Okay, thank you very much. Any genuinely further comments?
I think, Chair, there was a comment from somewhere, probably the one we've not all necessarily seen, about the visibility of the new property from the road, from the main road. But I'm looking, from what I can see from Google Earth, the house beyond the Hawthorns is on an elevated situation, is far more prominent and well visible from the main road. So I don't discount that as a reason for refusal.
Yeah, and there's also the house is actually on Chester Road, according to the photographs, are taller than Pool Cottage itself. Are there any further comments from councillors? Any clarifications from officers?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
So I propose the motion that the application is approved. Councillor Parish, are you prepared to second that motion?
I am, Chair, yes, certainly.
Okay. Are there any amendments to the motion? Okay, can we go to Democratic Services to take the vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Barr?
For.
Councillor Carey?
For.
Councillor Friend?
For.
Councillor Grime?
For.
Councillor Morgan?
For.
Councillor Mundry?
For.
Councillor Wheeler?
For.
And Councillor Wright?
For.
And Councillor Parish for.
Sorry, Councillor Parish for. So that application is approved. Chair, just yes. To advise the committee, it turns out there is a time limit for how long the live event meetings last. So we have until approximately 9:30 to conclude the meeting before the live feed will cut out.
Jenny,
so just to make
Jenny, we're okay now. We're okay. It's recently been increased. I've just put it in the chat.
Oh right, sorry about that.
No. We will do our best to complete by 9:30 anyway. This has been a long evening. Agenda item 9, the appeal decision summary. So the report is attached to the agenda starting on page 150. 2 appeals have been decided and 3 more received. Does the development manager wish to make any additional comment?
No, thank you, Chair.
Are there any questions from members? We've not usually had any, so I'll just throw that out. Just shout up if you want to make any comment.
Always nice to see appeals dismissed.
Any further points of clarification from officers?
No, thank you.
So I propose that the appeal summary report is accepted. Councillor Barr, are you prepared to second that?
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Can you take the vote, Jenny?
Thank you. Councillor Barr?
For.
Councillor Carey?
For.
Councillor Friend?
For.
Councillor Grime?
For.
Councillor Morgan.
4.
Councillor Mundry.
4.
Councillor Parish.
4.
Councillor Wheeler.
4.
And Councillor Wright.
4.
Thank you. The report is noted.
I've been on a golf course.
Agenda item 10. The report on the revised operating procedures for DMC. This is our 3-month review. The report is attached to the agenda starting on page 162. Does the development manager wish to make an additional comment?
There's just one thing I'd just like to draw your attention to. So this report comes further to DMC's resolution on the 6th of May that we will be operating with increased frequency, so every 3 weeks, and that certain applications will be delegated to officers. So it just reviews that process to date. Comments are welcome on how members perceive this, but would also just like to draw attention to the minor amendment that is proposed to the previous resolution, which is paragraph 1.3, and that removes the necessity to consult with the chief exec where he has specific interest involved in land or management relating to any application site or applicant. So in those instances where he has a specific interest, it would in that case go to either the Director for Growth or Linton Green.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any particular questions or comments from that members wish to make in the next 10 minutes? Councillor Barr.
I just like to say that given the very difficult circumstances, I think that these arrangements have worked well and even better than I expected, and I do appreciate all the additional work that it creates for officers. But in the circumstances, I think it's gone well, and excellent chairing has also helped.
Thank you, and I would agree with your comments on the excellent support we've had from officers. We're very grateful for it. Any further comments, Councillor Carey?
No, Chair, I'm happy with it.
Thank you, Councillor Friend.
No, happy with it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Morgan.
Quite happy.
Councillor Mundry.
Happy, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parish.
Sorry, Chair, back to 1.3. I wasn't exactly sure what the amendment was doing compared to what the existing situation is.
The existing situation referred the decision to the chief executive if various people had had an interest in it who would normally make the delegated decision, but we've just added the fact that we don't delegate to the chief executive if he has a specific interest, so it just puts him on the same level as everyone else. Can you confirm that, Nikki? Have I got that right?
That's correct, Chair, yes.
Yes. Is that okay?
It is. My only other point, Chair, was we've lost a lot of the early rigour as to when the members of the public could make submissions. So they are coming in dribs and drabs right up to the last minute, and it gets quite hard to keep tabs of what's coming in emails when you got 50 other emails incoming during the day as well. So
yes, that is true. It needs quite a lot of concentration, and I appreciate the work that the members do.
Especially when half of them answers to my questions, Chair.
Sorry, we don't accept the representations that come after the deadline. Sorry, I interrupted you. Your question, Councillor Parish.
Yeah, it was just, and that's on top of all the queries I've got as well.
They're always extremely useful and helpful to all the rest of the committee in realising just what the height of buildings is and so on. Any comments from Councillor Wheeler?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo Councillor Barr's comments, you know, for your chairmanship, Joan, and for all the work of the officers. And could I just ask anybody really, have we had any feedback from members of the public or parish councils as to how this is operating? Because we all think it's doing well, but that's just us.
Nikki, have we received anything? Do you know?
No, we haven't received anything, and I would take that as a positive. Because we obviously
yes,
more likely to receive
people usually let you know if they think it's.
I've had some feedback from members of the public who've watched our proceedings, and it's always been positive.
Good. Thank you very much. That's great to hear.
Nobody's turned round and said that this is a farce. This in no way represents the way the committee operated previously. Everyone has said that they were satisfied with the way that we conduct ourselves.
That's excellent. Thank you.
I think occasionally it's nice to be able to actually ask applicants and objectors in the flesh if there's something we're not sure about. Yeah. Well, I think that's arisen very rarely while we've been operating this system. So again,
yes, that's true.
Concentrates the mind.
Yes, it would be almost impossible to do so because there's a delay on what goes out over the web.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if we ever get back to normal, we probably ought to get back to live meetings.
Councillor Wright, have you got any comments or questions?
No, I think it works quite well. Just the internet can be a bit problematic, but no, I think.
Okay. Any further comments from any councillors?
No.
Right. So I propose that the report and its recommendation is accepted.
Chair, sorry, can I just be Chair? Sorry, can I just comment slightly?
Certainly.
Just to clarify on the chief executive's role, his role is a consultation role rather than a decision-making role.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So it's not an amendment to the delegation; it's an amendment to the consultation aspect.
Thank you. So a proposal still the same. Councillor Friend, would you like to second that?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, I will second that, Chair.
Right, thank you. Can I hand over to Democratic Services to take the vote?
Can we just shout aye, Chair?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Barr?
For.
Councillor Carey?
For.
Councillor Friend?
For.
Councillor Grime?
For.
Councillor Morgan?
For.
Councillor Mundry?
For.
Councillor Parish?
For.
Councillor Wheeler?
For.
And Councillor Wright?
For.
Thank you. The recommendations are noted. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the meeting. I appreciate it's been a long one and people have worked very hard. Thank you very much. Perhaps it was quite a lot of applications to consider, but as time goes on, more committees, I understand, are going to be meeting in the remote way, and of course the IT people are going, technical people are going to be supporting them as well generally, so we may not be able to put in the extra meetings to make them a bit shorter, but we will have to do the best we can in the situation. So thank you everyone for your work, both members and officers, and I declare the meeting to be closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.